Chapter 183. In Huaxia, there were many things to pay attention to during the new year. The 30th was naturally a day for family reunions. After the 30th, it would be the first day of the new year. From the first day of the new year, it was also the day to visit each family. Other than married daughters who couldn't return to their parents' home, each family was paying New Year's greetings. In addition to paying New Year's greetings, there were many other things to pay attention to. For example, porridge wasn't allowed on the first day of the new year because only poor people used to drink porridge. Therefore, eating porridge on the first day of the new year meant that they would be poor this year. They couldn't eat meat, not even eggs or milk. This was because the morning of the first day of the new year was also called the Pantheon meeting. It meant that all the gods would come out to pay New Year's greetings. Therefore, in order to show respect to these gods, they couldn't eat meat. They had to be vegetarian. At the same time, they couldn't take medicine, even supplements and the like. They couldn't call people's names to wake them up. This would make the person who was called be urged to work all year round. They couldn't pay New Year's greetings to people who were still sleeping because this would make them sick. Washing clothes on the first and second day of the new year was forbidden because the water god's birthday was in these 2 days. They couldn't take a nap during the day, nor could they dump the sewage, garbage, or sweep the floor. This would sweep away the wealth of the family. They couldn't let others take money from their pockets, and they couldn't collect debts from others. Of course, these were all old sayings. Now that Zhang Hai's family didn't have any elders, who would care about these things? Logically speaking, besides paying New Year's greetings to the elders on the first day of the new year, they couldn't go to other people's houses to play. Zhang Hai didn't miss this. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai responded. Then, he sat up from the bed in a daze. He first went to the bathroom to wash his hair, face, and teeth. After everything was tidied up, he put on his clothes and went downstairs. When he went downstairs, Zhang Hai saw Xueqi's car from afar. At this time, there were already many people sitting in the car. Zhang Hai casually looked around and found that there were still empty seats in the car. He sat down. Aya, what kind of person is he? He came out to play with us and even wore a Versace. It must be fake. As soon as Zhang Hai sat down, Fu Yuan started to shout. Originally, these people didn't notice, but when they heard Fu Yuan's words, they all looked over. But even if they did, they probably wouldn't understand what Versace was. In fact, even Zhang Hai didn't know much about it. Don't mention it. My wife bought it for me. Only then did Zhang Hai notice his clothes. He couldn't help mocking himself. Oh my God, which wife? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi on the other side also cried out. Zhang Hai patted Xueqi, who was in the driver's seat, and said with a smile, "Who else could it be? Well, don't make trouble for me. We are not divorced yet. Come on, let's go and buy something." What's there to buy? It's the first day of the new year. Which place is open? People aren't on the day. Xianghua also said from behind at this time. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Huaxia is like this. It's not easy to buy things after the new year. I don't care what to eat. I just want to drink. Let's just get some peanuts. At this time, another friend of Zhang Hai, Huang Yunfei, who had been playing with his mobile phone in the back, also interrupted. Who wants to drink with you? You are a person who works in the hospital. In addition to eating and drinking every day, who can drink more than you? My family is ready. My dad brought 2 sheep back a few days ago. One is to be boiled and the other is to be roasted. Let's eat boiled at noon and roast at night. After lunch, let's see if we are going to have some trouble or play poker. Fu Yuan heard Huang Yunfei's words and gave him the middle finger. Then he said to Xueqi. The group of people chatted and laughed as they drove quickly to Fu Yuan's house. Fu Yuan's house was not small, but it was not very big either. It was a standard 2-room apartment. Usually, Zhang Hai and the rest did not go there to play. After all, he was not the only one living here. His parents were also there. But because his hometown was not in Bing City, his parents would go back to their hometown to celebrate the new year. He was the only one at home. Naturally, he could do whatever he wanted. On the way, there was a small supermarket that was still open. They bought 5 boxes of beer, some Granny brand peanuts, and a few cans of Russian pickled cucumbers. After that, they drove to Fu Yuan's house. After parking the car, Everyone carried a box of wine. Jiang Hai also brought back peanuts and pickled cucumbers. They went to Fu Yuan's house. When they went to call Jiang Hai, it was only about 8 o'clock in the morning, but when they arrived, it was already 10 o'clock. After tidying up, everyone was ready for lunch. Under Fu Yuan's instructions, they set up the table and placed the beer outside on the windowsill. At this time, if the people in Bing City wanted to drink cold drinks, they did not need to put it in the fridge. The fridge was not as cold as the fridge outside. In less than 10 minutes, the fridge was already very cold. After setting up the table, they poured the peanuts, spiced beef, and a plate of cucumbers. The induction cooker in the middle was already on, and a pot of clear soup was boiling in a big pot. Speaking of hot pot, there were actually two kinds of hot pot. One was the hot pot that belonged to the land of Sichuan. The hot pot originated from the Fog City. According to legend, it was because the dock workers in the Fog City couldn't afford delicious food because they were poor. In some slaughterhouses upstream, people who slaughtered pigs and cows didn't eat offal after slaughtering pigs, sheep, and cows. These offal would be thrown into the river and floated away with the current. The workers downstream would pick up the offal and use chili or Sichuan pepper to remove the fishy smell. After that, they would cook the offal and eat it. This was the origin of hot pot. The other way to eat it was shabu. This had a much longer history. It was said that during the Song dynasty, the people of the Yuan dynasty were fighting everywhere. One time, when they were preparing to cook, the enemy suddenly attacked. At that time, the chef had an idea. He used the helmets of the soldiers as a pot and cooked a pot of mutton. After the soldiers finished eating, their morale was boosted, and they felt that it was delicious. After that, this dish was passed down, and this was the origin of shabu. At first glance, there was not much difference between these two methods of cooking. But if one looked closely, one would know that these were two different ways of eating. Hot pot was spicy and spicy. It emphasized on the heavy taste, heavy ingredients, and heavy oil. When eating, it was dipped in oil and not sauce. Also, the main ingredients for the hot pot were the internal organs and beef. Almost no one would eat the internal organs of the mutton. On the other hand, shabu used fresh soup as the base. It was divided into seafood pot, bone soup pot, and so on. It emphasized the original taste of the soup. When eating, it was dipped in a sauce plate made of sesame paste and other spices. The main ingredient was meat, mutton, and of course, beef. Bing City was located in Longjiang Province, and next to it was Inner Mongolia. Therefore, they had the habit of eating shabu instead of hot pot. For example, the soup base that Jiang Hai made today was not the hot pot base bought from the supermarket. It was made by himself. He added scallion, ginger, wine, a few shrimps, a few small crabs, and a few shells. These seafood were used to make the seafood soup base. When the soup was boiled, the taste would come out. It was light and fragrant, but it had the smell of seafood. Fish and mutton were fresh together, so if the mutton was cooked with this soup base, the taste would make people go crazy. Not long after, a fresh aroma began to reverberate in the room, and everyone couldn't help but feel a little hungry. "Where's the meat?" Glancing at Fu Yuan, who was also swallowing his saliva, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask him. "Oh, let's go get it." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan remembered that the meat hadn't been taken out yet. He immediately took Jiang Hai to his freezer. Opening the freezer, there was a pile of steaks on one side. These were the steaks that Jiang Hai sent over. There were also two huge plastic bags, one black and one white. Jiang Hai then opened the black one and found that there was a whole mutton inside. This made Jiang Hai a little speechless. How could he eat it? "Not this. This is a black mutton. It's for roasting at night. That's for today's shabu." Seeing Jiang Hai's expression, Fu Yuan knew that he took the wrong one. After putting down the mutton in his hand, he picked up the other bag. The other bag was full of mutton slices, but compared to the mutton slices sold in the market, the mutton slices here were a little different in size. What's the difference?" Glancing at the mutton taken out, Jiang Hai asked with some puzzlement. "Of course there's a difference. This is a black mutton. The black mutton's meat is firm, it grows slowly, and it's aggressive. Because of its aggressive nature, it's more often raised in the mountains. There's a lot of exercise, so the meat is particularly good. Of course it's still a lot worse than your beef, but this mutton is also the best I've ever eaten." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan began to talk about it. In fact, he just checked it after his father got the mutton back. This shabu is Ujimkin mutton. It's produced in Inner Mongolia. Do you know the capital, Donglai Shun? This mutton is specially for Donglai Shun, and a plate of it costs 68 yuan. It's much more expensive than the average boar goat. We've tasted it once at home, and it's indeed much better than the mutton you can buy outside. The fat isn't greasy, and the lean meat isn't too dry. Once it's boiled in water, the freshness of the mutton and the taste of the seafood are mixed together. Oh my God, I can't take it anymore. I'm about to drool. I'm almost drooling. Licking his lips, Fu Yuan took out 3 bags of mutton from the big bag and hurried to the living room. As for Zhang Hai, he also swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Westerners love to eat mutton. This could be seen from the fact that many of their main dishes were mutton chops. The little brothers of the United States, Canada, and Australia all love to eat mutton, especially Australia. The mutton and wool industry could be regarded as the top in the world, but the people of the United States didn't like to eat mutton very much. Zhang Hai also raised some mutton in his manor, but he hadn't eaten mutton for so long. Now that he thought about it, he really missed the taste of pork and mutton. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, he was a little hungry. Chapter 184. Come on, let's start. As the mutton was placed into the soup pot, the original bright red color of the mutton gradually receded and was replaced by a grayish-white color. The room was filled with a fragrant aroma, which stimulated the saliva secreting from Zhang Hai and the others' mouths. Finally, when the soup pot began to boil again, Zhang Hai gave the order. Everyone's chopsticks were the first to attack the mutton in the pot. Zhang Hai picked up the first mouthful of mutton and ate it directly without dipping it in the sauce. When the mutton was put into his mouth, a special fragrance also constantly reverberated in his mouth. The mutton had a faint rank smell and absorbed the base of the seafood in the soup. The meat was firm but not difficult to bite. With a gentle bite, the meat could be completely broken. That kind of chewy feeling constantly impacted in the mouth. This is a completely different concept from beef. This is the taste that Zhang Hai is familiar with. Frowning slightly, Zhang Hai suddenly felt a little emotional. If he can't eat this kind of mutton in the United States, what should he do? Suddenly, he wants to import some mutton from China. This mutton tastes really good. Where do you think you bought this mutton from? I'll get some back to the United States to raise. While constantly picking the meat in the pot, Zhang Hai asked Fu Yuan. Don't even think about it. This mutton is a national protected breed. It's farmed in that area. When my dad went to buy it, the people there had to kill the mutton before selling it to my dad. You still want to buy a live one? Anyway, I have no way. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan shook his head and said to Zhang Hai while eating. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but feel a little helpless. You say that they call themselves the global village every day, but in the end, they can't even trade with each other. Humans are really hypocritical. But he didn't think much about it at the moment and started eating directly. Everyone was satisfied with their lunch. They ate 7 caddies of mutton and 5 bottles of beer each. After that, lunch came to an end. Fu Yuan and the others cleared the table and started playing mahjong. As for Zhang Hai, he was lying on the sofa in Fu Yuan's house. He used his phone to check how to get the ingredients he wanted to buy to America. However, he wouldn't have known if he didn't investigate. Now that he did, he was really shocked. Thinking back to all these years, he had always heard through some channels that certain countries had banned certain things from Huaxia. Big things like weapons and ammunition, small things like fish species and cattle species, everything was banned. But in fact, Huaxia's embargo on foreign products was even stricter. For example, the famous rice seeds could not be brought out. He could buy rice, because the current rice did not have the ability to be planted. I heard that it costs more than 2,000 yuan per caddy. It seems to be something like Mao Jian. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan said to Zhang Hai while playing mahjong. Mao Jian? Mao Feng. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he looked it up on the internet and couldn't help but chuckle. But it was the same. Whether it was Zhang Hai or Fu Yuan, they actually didn't know much about tea. Now Zhang Hai also suddenly felt that this tea seemed to be quite delicious, and it seemed that the tea leaves had a stimulating effect on the scales on his body, so he became interested. At the same time, he decided to buy some tea leaves back. He didn't care about a few thousand yuan per caddy. What he cared about was that this thing had to have an effect. At the moment, he was no longer polite. While drinking tea, he played with his phone and thought about what he would bring back when he went back. Although in the United States you can buy what you want to eat if you have money, but there are always some things that taste the same in different places of origin. For example, pigs, sheep, tea leaves, sauces. Originally, he wanted to go back as soon as possible yesterday, but he didn't expect that after wandering around today, he found that there were a lot of things he wanted to buy. Unknowingly, it was also night time. They ate hot pot for lunch and roasted lamb for dinner. The lamb was sliced off from the black goat. Xueqi was the main knife. After slicing the lamb, he marinated it with cooking wine, ginger, fennel, sesame seeds, pepper, starch, monosodium glutamate, sesame seeds, pepper, starch, monosodium glutamate, sesame seeds, pepper, starch, monosodium glutamate, and if one wanted to eat spicy food, he added a little chili powder. The lamb marinated in this way didn't have an unacceptable rank odor, nor was it too pungent. While retaining the original freshness and sweetness of the lamb, it also added other flavors. Then, it was roasted on a grill. Zhang Hai really didn't know how to describe the taste. In Zhang Hai's impression, this was how lamb should taste. In terms of taste, the lamb might be a lot worse than Zhang Hai's special grade A snowflake frost beef. However, this kind of cooking method was not available in the United States. Although Mrs. Philemon was receiving Zhang Hai's money, she really wouldn't spend so much time roasting these things. Even some Western cooks were only more proficient in the use of heat. It was delicious, but to Zhang Hai, delicious food couldn't compare to what he loved to eat. After another meal, the few of them drank the rest of the wine. They drank until nearly 12 o'clock in the evening. Everyone fell asleep in a daze. Because they were all men, they didn't need to be so particular. Fu Yuan and Xiang Hua went to sleep in his room. Su Wei and Huang Yuanfei slept on the sofa. Zhang Hai pulled a quilt and directly made a bed on the floor in the living room. The building in Fu Yuan's house was just built in the past few years, so it was also geothermal. There was no need to worry about the cold at night. The next morning, when Zhang Hai woke up, his buddies still showed no signs of waking up. Since he had woken up, he couldn't let them sleep any longer. Zhang Hai went to the balcony and opened the window. The winter wind mixed with the snowflakes blew their tears down. In an instant, the two sleeping on the sofa woke up. Since they couldn't sleep, no one else could. They quietly opened Fu Yuan's door. This time, no one slept. They went to the bathroom in a daze one after another to solve their personal hygiene problem. The group of 5 cooked 3 caddies of dumplings in Fu Yuan's house. Generally speaking, during the New Year in the Northeast, a family might not have much other things, but they definitely had dumplings. Once the 3 caddies of sour flour meat dumplings entered their stomachs, everyone woke up. After helping Fu Yuan pack up, everyone left in Su Wei's car. It was already afternoon when Zhang Hai returned home. After casually eating at home, Zhang Hai didn't idle around in the afternoon. Instead, he went to the nearby supermarket. For a service organization like this, under normal circumstances, it would be open for a while during the day. However, it used to be closed at 8 or 10 in the evening. Now, it was 4 or 5 in the afternoon. This time, Zhang Hai wanted to buy a lot of things. He needed to prepare in advance. After taking a taxi, he went to a large supermarket near his house. He first went there to buy some sauces and pickles. These things were allowed to be brought. There were also some domestic sauces sold abroad, such as Lao Gan Ma, but the price was ridiculously expensive. It was 6 or 7 yuan in China, but it was more than $10 abroad. The price difference was dozens of times. In addition to Lao Gan Ma, there was also Xueqi sauce and garlic sauce. Zhang Hai was a little tired of spaghetti sauces. These sauces were more reliable. Chapter 185. Hey, can't you stay for a few more days? I've already bought the plane ticket. Let's go together on the 10th. Sitting in Fu Yuan's car, Zhang Hai looked at the scenery of Bingqing outside, and Fu Yuan kept talking in his ear. Do you think I want to go back so soon? If it weren't for the incident at the manor, I wouldn't be in a hurry to go back. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai said softly, but whether this is the case or not, probably only he himself knows. Today was the 5th day of the new year. To be exact, after the 5th day, the new year was over for ordinary people, and Zhang Hai also chose to leave Bingqing and return to Boston today. Compared to Zhang Hai, who could leave whenever he wanted, Fu Yuan was not as well off. He had to stay at home with his father. His mother could only leave after the 10th day of the new year. Moreover, he could only go to Zhang Hai's place to play for a few days, because they were only on the 15th day of the new year. There was still a week of annual leave, which added up to 12 days. Even if they took 4 days to travel between the two places, they only had 8 days to play. Originally, he thought that when Zhang Hai came back this time, he could go with him. But he did not expect that Zhang Hai would leave on the 5th day of the new year. It was not very appropriate to say that Zhang Hai left. The reason why he was in such a hurry to go back was that the incident at his manor seemed to be a bit out of control. Because he received a call from Rabinci the day before yesterday, saying that someone had sneaked into his manor, but after being bitten by little Huang, he forced himself to escape. The police were involved in this case, and Zhang Hai also called Moses Adams and asked him to take care of things from time to time. But even so, the security of Zhang Hai's manor did not need to be too worried. After all, after this incident, Rabinci and Ai Dehua were more cautious about the issue of protection. The police also came to patrol every few minutes. After all, even if Zhang Hai had the subsidy from Winthrop, he was definitely the biggest taxpayer in Winthrop town. If they did not protect him, who else could they protect? In addition, there was also Xiao Bai and little Huang. If these guys wanted to break in, they had to see if they were strong enough. The reason why he was in a hurry now was mainly because of 2 groups of people. The first group was his classmates. This was mainly Xiang Hua's fault. After Zhang Hai gave them the beef that day, Xiang Hua went out with a few other classmates on the 2nd day of the new year. He drank too much and told them that Zhang Hai gave them the beef. When they heard that a jin of beef was worth 2,000 yuan and Zhang Hai gave them 10 jin without blinking, these classmates were tempted. These days, he did not know where they got Zhang Hai's phone number from. They asked him out and asked if he was at home. Zhang Hai did not know what to do. If these classmates could still be rejected, then his relatives that he had almost forgotten were another wave of trouble. Among his classmates, there was a mother who was his second aunt's colleague. They usually had a good relationship. When she called, she told them. This time, all of Zhang Hai's relatives knew that Zhang Hai was successful, rich, and successful in the United States, so these relatives came to his door. In the face of classmates, he could still reject, but in the face of relatives, although Zhang Hai disdained them, it was really not good for him to say harsh words. When Zhang Hai's mother passed away, these relatives did not even come to the funeral, let alone to take care of her. Even if they did come, they would just throw a few hundred yuan in a hurry. Then they would say that they had something to do or that they were still at work and leave directly. Speaking of this, he had to thank Qi Li's mother. She was the one who called a motorcade and helped to call over a dozen people so that the old man could leave without being too shabby. It was really like the tea cools down when the person leaves. In the face of such relatives, Zhang Hai would be strange if he cared about them. Except for buying some gifts for his uncle, who used to be good to his family, he did not care about anyone else. However, his cold treatment could not make these people quiet down. So in the end, Zhang Hai had to hide in advance. In fact, he could also go out to play, but after thinking about it, it was better to go directly to the manor than to other places. Speaking of which, after being out for these days, he really missed the people and scenery in the manor. Hey, I'm just saying. You said that it was the first time I took such a long plane, and no one talked to me or anything. How boring. In fact, taking a plane was a very boring thing. Taking a train, you could see the scenery, but taking a plane, besides looking at the clouds, what else could you see? Fu Yuan also had the capital and appearance to flirt with the stewardess. If he asked for a drink, she might not even care about him. Well, don't mutter. Isn't it just 5 days? I'll pick you up in New York. Looking at Fu Yuan, Zhang Hai smiled. When he was eating on the first day of the new year, he also asked his friends if they wanted to go to Boston. Unfortunately, although these people were a little tempted, they were a little reluctant to pay for the plane tickets. Flying from Huaxia to the United States, even if there was a discount, a round trip would cost at least 10,000 yuan. Why couldn't this 10,000 yuan be used? Their financial conditions didn't allow for it either. Zhang Hai did not lack the money, but he knew that if he took all the money, these people might not agree. Everything must follow the rules. They were friends, and there was no problem of who would take advantage of who. They were not flattering each other, and they were not in a superior and subordinate relationship. They were equals. It would be different if they needed help, but now, they could not open their mouths. Jiang Hai also knew that they had to maintain their self-esteem, so after mentioning it, he didn't say much. In the end, only Fu Yuan took a plane to Boston on the 10th day of the new year to look for him. While the two were chatting, they had arrived at Bing City Airport. He had just returned for 6 days, and he did not expect to leave so soon. When he came, he only carried a bag, and when he left, he also carried a bag. Because Jiang Hai had bought too many things, he sent them back to Boston first. This time, Jiang Hai bought a lot of things based on the principle of staying in Boston. 100 packets of garlic chili sauce, 10 boxes of Lao Gan Ma spicy beef sauce, 100 packets of Xueqi sauce. These were specially used for cucumbers and lettuce. Other than these, there were also lots of sauces and pickles. Jiang Hai liked to eat oregano, xiao wei, a type of radish pickled vegetable, authentic Korean spicy cabbage, etc. Other than these things, there were also many Bing City specialties. For example, dried sausages. Jiang Hai had bought 50 jin of dried sausages, and all the sausages were lean meat. Although the dried sausages were a bit dry, it was fine as long as Jiang Hai liked to eat them. Other than these, there was also Bing City's barbecued pork. It was air-dried and tasted good. It was also 50 jin. There were also barbecued sausages, which were the so-called extended children's sausages. It was a type of Bing City's red sausages. Bing City's red sausages were the best in the world. Regardless of whether Feng Yu liked to eat them or not, at least the reputation of Bing City's red sausages was much better than other places' red sausages. As for the black pigs, black sheep, etc., Feng Yu had asked around these few days. If Feng Yu wanted them alive, he could go to the local government to apply for a farm permit. If the government allowed it, he could sell them to Feng Yu. But if Feng Yu wanted to ship them to Boston, there were no doors or windows. But Jiang Hai did not want to send some mutton and pork back. Although there were not many mutton and pork in the US, they were still available. If they were not alive, the taste would be discounted. This was also one of the biggest headaches for Jiang Hai. But luckily, he had bought a lot of vegetables recently. A few days ago, Feng Yu went to a high-class tea house to drink tea. As he was generous, he drank almost all the teas in the tea house. He had also figured out some things about tea. Tea was generally divided into green tea and black tea. The black tea in the UK was the black tea from Xueqi. Maybe it was because they liked the slightly bitter taste. This was just like coffee, and black tea was the coffee of the aristocrats. Of course, the price of good tea was much more expensive than the best coffee. But Jiang Hai did not feel anything about black tea. He felt it was too bitter. But he had started to like green tea. Xueqi's green tea was also divided into many kinds. Longjing, Biluakun, Maofeng, Guanpian, Injin, Maojian, Yancha, and so on were all green tea. After drinking so much tea, Jiang Hai felt the most comfortable with 3 kinds of tea. One of them was the Longjing tea, which was known as the king of green tea. However, Longjing tea was also divided into 3, 6 and 9 grades. The best was the Westlake tea, followed by the Zhujiang tea. The Westlake tea was also divided into 5 categories: lion, dragon, cloud, running, and plum tea. However, the Longjing tea from cloud and running was no longer available, because these 2 places had become tourist attractions, especially Running Tiger. The Longjing tea from Running Tiger was the best. Among the lion, dragon, and plum tea, Maijiawa's Longjing tea was ranked lower. However, even if it was ranked lower, the top-grade Longjing tea from before the Ming dynasty could still be sold for 2,000 to 3,000 a jin. Lion Mountain's Longjing was even more expensive. Before the Ming dynasty was sold at 5,000, and it might not even be available. Jiang Hai bought Maijiawa's Longjing. After all, he bought a lot. He bought 10 cans for 500 yuan. In addition to Longjing, he also bought a May bamboo green and golden altar sparrow tongue. The price was almost the same. Jiang Hai bought a lot of things that added up to more than 400 caddies. He spent less than 10,000 yuan. But to buy these tea leaves, Jiang Hai spent more than 10,000 yuan. But these were all obtained by him, so he endured it. But to find an international express delivery to Boston, he spent more than 8,000 yuan. The postage was almost as expensive as the price of the things, which made Jiang Hai's heart ache. But there was no way, Boston didn't sell it. The things were left 2 days earlier than Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai left now, the things should arrive when he went back. Now that the tea leaves were in his backpack, he was wondering if he should get a few tea plants for himself. But there was no way, and he didn't know how to do it. He had to go back and ask. He just didn't know if Luo Binci and the others knew how to do it. Thinking about the rough character and style of the American people, Jiang Hai felt a little unsure. Shaking his head and saying goodbye to Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai also boarded the plane to the imperial capital. Chapter 186. Boss, this way. When Jiang Hai came out of New York's JFK airport, he saw Philemon Turner waving to him from a distance. Seeing Philemon Turner here, Jiang Hai also walked out quickly with his backpack. Hey boss, you're back so early. I thought you would stay for another week before coming back. Seeing Jiang Hai, Philemon stepped forward and hugged Jiang Hai, and then his broken mouth disease completely broke out, and he quickly said to Jiang Hai, "How dare I not come back? If I didn't come back, you would have turned the sky upside down." He smiled and punched Philemon in the chest. Hey boss, this time it has nothing to do with me. I can only say that your fish farm is too eye-catching, but I have to admit, boss, you raised 2 good dogs. Why didn't I see it at the beginning? Those 2 dogs were so powerful that they bit a man. If this guy wasn't so ruthless, he would rather have a piece of meat torn off to escape. He would have been caught alive by us, these damn white-skinned pigs. Sitting in the driver's seat, Philemon kept cursing. Wow, you dare to call me a white-skinned pig here? Aren't you afraid that Robbins and Ed will come to trouble you? Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai said with a little surprise. They can't hear me now. I believe my boss won't complain, right? Haha, okay, my boss, let's go. Looking at Jiang Hai's words, Philemon pretended to wipe his sweat, then stepped on the accelerator, and the car sped out. After leaving the airport, they sped all the way to the north. The distance from New York to Boston is actually not too far. It's only 400 or 500 kilometers. Including the place where Jiang Hai lives, it's only 5 or 6 hours of driving. However, it's quite tiring for one person to drive for 5 or 6 hours. But Jiang Hai can also drive. The two decided to drive every 2 hours, so it doesn't matter. On the road, Jiang Hai's F-650 was running very fast, constantly moving forward on New York's highway. On the road they could often see some tour buses. It was the Huaxia New Year, so there were definitely many people who came to the United States to play. After all, for the current Huaxia, although the poor still accounted for the majority, there were more and more rich people. Through the car window, Jiang Hai could clearly see that the bus was filled with people wearing different colored water hats. They were listening to a tour guide who was standing at the front of the bus. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai also felt a bit emotional. Thinking back, these people were his goal. People who could go abroad to play at the end of the year were undoubtedly very enviable. But now, it seems that he had unknowingly surpassed most of these people. At least in terms of wealth, most of these people could not be compared with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was a bit surprised. But now, it seemed that he had unknowingly surpassed most of these people. Unknowingly, the car had already driven out of New York and entered Massachusetts. The scenery along the way was actually not very good. If it was spring, summer or autumn, the scenery along the way would be very good. Although there were no famous mountains or rivers, there were mountains, rivers and fields, which made people feel very comfortable. But now, after all, it was just the beginning of spring, so there was more snow on the ground that had not melted. Some small rivers that could be seen on the side of the road were flowing slowly, but there were still some residual ice on the edge. Some grasslands in the distance were also withered at this time. Only some green light on the branches of some trees by the roadside could be seen, which represented the aura of new life. Boss, I have to admit that the manor you bought is indeed a treasure land, you know? When we finished clearing the snow, we found that the grass under the snow was still green. They actually grew ahead of time, so we didn't need to resow grass seeds. Not only did this save us a lot of money, but it also allowed our cows to eat fresh grass faster. Looking at the bleak scenery outside, Philip said with a proud face. But when Jiang Hai heard this, he was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. Because other people didn't know what was going on with the grass, but Jiang Hai was very clear. If it weren't for his blood, his manor would also be bleak at this time. Fortunately, These people didn't think that the grass was supernatural, which made Jiang Hai feel relieved. In the blink of an eye, Philip drove for more than 2 hours. In order to prevent him from getting too tired, Jiang Hai took the initiative to switch to the driver's seat at the next rest stop. After the two ate some snacks in the rest stop, Jiang Hai continued to drive towards his manor. Although Jiang Hai's physical fitness is very strong, after driving for more than an hour, he couldn't concentrate anymore. His eyes were looking around. At this time, he passed by a tour bus. He glanced back and saw that the people inside the bus were eating lunch. Some of them might be northerners. At this time, they were eating red sausages. When he saw the red sausages, he suddenly remembered the things he sent. By the way, have you seen the things I sent? Looking at Philip, Jiang Hai asked with a smile. Things? What things? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip froze for a moment, then asked with some doubts. It's a big bag of things. There's a lot of food and some spices in it. Didn't you see them? Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. His things have been sent for almost 4 days. Why haven't they arrived yet? No, I didn't see them. Looking at Philip's serious expression, Jiang Hai frowned slightly. He took out his mobile phone and called the express delivery company. As a result, he learned that the things hadn't been delivered yet. These damn guys, why are they so slow? After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai's brows wrinkled. Multinational express delivery companies, after all, were different from domestic ones. They needed to go through customs to check if this thing could be sent abroad by plane. If it was off-season, it would take about 4 or 5 days for it to be sent abroad. However, they were very busy recently. Some people who were abroad couldn't go home during the holidays. Most of their family members would choose to send them some things. Even if they couldn't go home, they could still experience the taste of their hometown, right? Therefore, this caused the workload of the customs to increase. It was precisely because of this that multinational express delivery companies generally said that the delivery time was 1 week to half a month. Sending it within half a month wasn't considered a dereliction of duty. Now that he heard it, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. However, he couldn't possibly return empty-handed after returning to the country. In addition to his own food, there were also some toys that he had brought back for his subordinates. In fact, it wasn't anything expensive. It was more of a thought. Other than some food, there were mainly cigarettes and wine. Don't think that the people in the United States didn't give gifts. In fact, they would give gifts if they wanted to. It was just that if they didn't have a very, very close relationship, the officials wouldn't dare to accept gifts. But usually, when they visited each other, they would give gifts. For example, when a family was having a birthday party, or just ordinary gatherings, they would give gifts. The thing that the people in the United States gave the most was the red wine rack. Heaven knows, Jiang Hai didn't have that much red wine in his house. Other than the red wine rack, some homemade biscuits, cakes, and so on were also very good gifts. It wasn't how expensive it was, but more of a thought. Compared to giving money in China, it wasn't so direct here. Jiang Hai had also stayed here for half a year. He had a rough understanding of the customs of the United States. So when he came back this time, although he didn't drink baijiu, he still bought some. Whether these people drank it or not, this was his thought, and these people would be very happy to accept it. But now if he came back first and the gifts didn't arrive, it would indeed be a bit abrupt. There's no other way. Let's buy some gifts first. Seeing that the highway leading straight to Winthrop was in front, Jiang Hai sighed, turned the steering wheel, and ran in the direction of Boston. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Philemon was also shocked. Boss, aren't you going home? Why are you going to Boston? Looking at Jiang Hai, Philemon asked strangely. The gifts I bought for you are still in Xueqi. It will take at least a week for those things to arrive, so I'm going to get you some gifts first. Jiang Hai didn't hide it from Philemon, but said directly. Hey, what gifts? It's the same if you give them to us in a few days. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philemon waved his hand. He really didn't care much about these things. The snow in the manor had almost melted recently. They were very busy every day. Okay, I have the final say in this matter. Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai waved his hand and interrupted him. He stepped on the accelerator and the car rushed towards the northern part of Boston. Although Jiang Hai didn't know much about Boston, he had come here many times before. However, He had been here many times after all, so he was very clear about the general situation here. He especially remembered one shop. A shop that let him buy a lot of chickens. God knows why he was obsessed with it at the beginning. He didn't know how to cook chickens. What's the use of buying so many chickens? Chicken stewed with mushrooms. It's delicious, but what's the point of saying that if he doesn't know how to cook it? Zhang Hai is still raising those chickens. Although he didn't stew them with mushrooms, at least he solved the problem of eating eggs. As for that shop, he remembered it deeply. After turning a corner, he came to the shop that once cheated him. Although it was in the United States, it was obvious that this family still followed the old customs in China. The door of the small supermarket was pasted with two huge Fu characters upside down. According to the old people, this is called, Fu has arrived. In addition to the Fu characters, there was also a couplet in front of the door. There were two strings of lanterns hanging on both sides of the couplet. It was very festive. Chapter 187. Welcome. When Zhang Hai entered the supermarket, because it was noon, the people here were eating there. A group of 7 people, including 2 salespeople and 4 people wearing security guard uniforms. In addition to being responsible for the security here, they also need to move goods and replenish the supermarket. In addition to these staff, there were only 2 people who looked like outsiders. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s was sitting there in casual clothes, and the old man who tricked Zhang Hai to buy a chicken last time. As soon as she saw Zhang Hai come in, a girl wearing a waiter's uniform who was sitting there eating stood up immediately and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing her words, the other people here also turned their heads. "Oh, it's you, little brother. Have you finished the chicken?" Seeing that it was Zhang Hai, it was obvious that the old man here still had some impression of Zhang Hai. He couldn't help but smile and say. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes. "No, I'm raising it to lay eggs." While responding, Zhang Hai walked into the supermarket. "Raising it to lay eggs? Say, you young people just don't know how to cherish it. Only this kind of chicken that has not laid eggs can make delicious chicken stew. The meat is firm, just like a woman. It is worthless after giving birth. Cough. Little Lu, I'm sorry." As soon as he heard Zhang Hai's words, the old man here said subconsciously, but when he said it, he remembered that there was a girl beside him, so he said it with a smile, but the girl blushed. "You think I don't know that chicken stew is delicious? The problem is that I don't know how to make it." Hearing the old man's words, Zhang Hai said afterward, "If you don't know how to make it, why did you buy it?" Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the old man here couldn't help but be stunned and said with some doubts, "I was fooled by you." Zhang Hai's eyes looked at the old man in front of him contemptuously, making the old man a little embarrassed. He couldn't help but touch his nose and laugh. "Cough, if you don't know how to make it, you can also return it." Although he was embarrassed, he still said with a little confidence, "Forget it. I've suckled a piece of land for them in my manor. I'll feed them some food and they'll look for insects to eat. They're pretty good when they're alive. I've eaten their eggs, and they're very delicious. They're much better than the eggs you buy here." Although Zhang Hai didn't eat those chickens, Zhang Hai liked the eggs they laid very much. After all, the grass at his place was sprinkled with his blood. They were all improved varieties, so the insects eating the grass in the grass were naturally improved varieties. After these chickens ate these insects, the eggs they laid not only had the taste of eggs, but also the smell of grass. They were also very refreshing and tasted very good. Moreover, even if he didn't check, Zhang Hai knew that the nutrition inside was extremely rich. Because he didn't buy a rooster to pick the eggs, those eggs couldn't hatch into chicks. Zhang Hai ate them with peace of mind. "Hey, you are quite good. The eggs of these free-range chickens aren't much cheaper than chickens." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the old man here also nodded in appreciation. Indeed, a free-range chicken egg was sold for about 1 yuan. Even if it was only laid once every 2 or 3 days, it could lay more than 100 eggs a year. This way, the money for the chickens would be earned back, and the old hen wouldn't be wasted. It was still very good for making soup. "What are you going to buy this time?" Perhaps there was some guilt in his heart. Seeing Zhang Hai come in, the old man here also stood up and was ready to introduce to Zhang Hai with a smile. "Dad, let me greet the guest." Seeing the old man stand up, The middle-aged man over there also stood up and said eagerly, "Hurry up and eat. You still have to go to school in a while. This kid only knows how to cause trouble all day long. I can still eat when I am hungry. Don't get up. Come, young man, let's go here." Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, the old man smiled and walked over. Nodding to the middle-aged man over there, Zhang Hai walked to this side of the goods area. As soon as he came over, the old man asked him. It can be seen that the old man usually doesn't mean anything. He still likes to talk very much. "What do you want to buy? Isn't it the new year? I returned to China a few days ago, but the things sent by express delivery haven't been delivered yet. But this time I came back, I have to at least give some gifts to the workers in my manor. I thought that you have more things here, so I came to take a look." Zhang Hai glanced at the things on the shelves and explained. "Well, it's true that it's not easy to make a trip back to China. I have to bring something back, but you don't know that they don't really give gifts. Even if it's Christmas, only relatives will give gifts. The things they want are more focused on practicality, not price or origin." After all, the old man had stayed in the United States for much longer than Zhang Hai, so he naturally knew more. Most of the gifts given by ordinary people in the United States were very practical or very cheap. There is no such thing as too many gifts here. If you give the wrong thing, they will really turn hostile. And the most important thing is that they basically won't return the gift. This is also something that makes many Huaxia people uncomfortable. But fortunately, Zhang Hai doesn't care about this. He just hopes that these people can work hard for him. Other than that, he doesn't care. When you give something, it mainly depends on who you give it to. Men, women, blacks, whites, South Americans, or Asians. All countries and all races are very particular. If you really can't figure it out, you can give a red wine rack. This is also one of the most tacit things here. Looking at Zhang Hai, who was listening carefully, the old man began to talk non-stop. Zhang Hai also calculated in his heart. Most of the people in Zhang Hai's manor are white. Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, Harriman Fells, Belle Lester, Edward Anderson, Tommy Charles, and Marlon Rupert are all white. These people are all white. Philemon Turner and Eleanor Cece are black. Andrew Christian is Latin American. So, the things he prepared are all the same. If it's a white person, it also depends on where his ancestry is. If it's a descendant of England, you can give him black tea. He will definitely like it. If it's a descendant of other countries, such as Ireland or France, you can give him coffee and cheese. He will like it very much. If it's a black person, you can give them coffee and oatmeal. Of course, you can give them some handicrafts, such as this Huaxia festival. They will also be very happy. If it's a Latin American, I recommend you give them this. Lao Gan Ma, they love this thing. But other than this thing, you can decide for the other food. In fact, to be honest, I have been in the United States for more than 10 years, and I really haven't seen too many foreigners who like to eat our Huaxia's authentic Huaxia food. They eat more of the improved food. As the old man spoke, he introduced the things in front of him to Zhang Hai. And his words also made Zhang Hai, who originally wanted to give some sausages, barbecued pork, and so on, stop for a moment. Indeed, he had been in the United States for a period of time. It was impossible to say that he did not want to eat Huaxia food. However, he had also eaten at the Huaxia restaurant here. The taste of the food was quite different. There were many restaurants on the streets here. Sichuan cuisine and Cantonese cuisine were the two main series. Other than that, there were some Shandong cuisine restaurants mixed in with restaurants in the Jiangsu and Zhejiang regions. However, the taste of the food made in these restaurants was really similar to Zhang Hai's. Americans did not like to eat salty things or bones, so basically, all the freshwater fish dishes were not fated with them. Their taste was more sweet and sour, and this sourness was not acetic acid, but the kind of sourness that was found in Cantonese cuisine. The taste was somewhat similar to Cantonese cuisine, but it was also heavier and more sour than Cantonese cuisine. If one were to talk about it, it was somewhat a combination of Cantonese cuisine and Zhejiang cuisine. Even though Zhang Hai's favorite dish was double-cooked pork, to be honest, he was not used to eating Huaxia food in the United States. However, this kind of taste was the favorite of the people in the United States. No matter where you did business, sticking to the authentic taste was not the way to make a fortune, especially in the restaurant industry. The most important thing was to cater to the local taste. Even in Jiang Hai's opinion, this was no longer Chinese food. It only had the shape, but not the taste. This was also why Jiang Hai would rather eat steak and fried cod sticks at home every day, although he would get tired of eating them. What about the wine? After looking around, Jiang Hai found that there were still a lot of Huaxia wine in the shop. Although the price was much more expensive than in China, Jiang Hai still asked because he also bought a lot of wine by express delivery. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man waved his hand and said with disdain, "They won't like to drink our wine." Speaking of which, the Westerners who like to drink our wine the most are the Russians. They especially like to drink our wine with high alcohol content. I heard your accent. You should be from the Northeast. Then you should know. When Westerners drank, they liked to drink wine that was soft and smooth. Just like the four base wines, it was like this. No matter how strong the alcohol was, it would burn and roll in the stomach, but at least it had to taste good. However, Huaxia wine was more of a sauce smell when it entered the stomach. First, it was warm, and second, it was comfortable. Of course, there were also pure spiciness like burning knives, but drinking that kind of wine was not good for the body. Most Westerners did not like Huaxia wine, except for the Russians, who were from the Soviet Union. In the past, Jiang Hai had heard that because Black Dragon Province, where Bing City was located, was only a river away from Russia, so there were often Russians coming from the port to Huaxia to drink. Jiang Hai even heard that in the 80s and 90s, a bottle of Northeast aged wine, the kind that cost a few RMB, could be exchanged for 3 purebred Caucasus dogs at the border. At that time, one Caucasus dog was sold for 200 renminbi. 1 or 300 yuan could also be exchanged for gold directly. When gold was 80 yuan per gram, a bottle of wine could be exchanged for 2 or 3 grams. It was really a good deal. Of course, there were also a lot of risks. If someone was a thief or provoked the opposite party and was killed, then their death would be in vain. No one would stand up for them. Chapter 188. Let's go. Carrying several large bags of gifts, Jiang Hai returned to the car and said to Philemon, who was sitting in the driver's seat. Philemon looked back at the large bags that Jiang Hai brought back and looked inside curiously. After discovering that there were many handicrafts inside, his face was filled with a smile. Indeed, compared to food and drinks, they were more interested in these Huaxia handicrafts that represented mysterious symbols. The car engine started, and not long after, it sped all the way to the highway. After another half an hour or so, Jiang Hai had stopped in front of his manor. After entering the command, the manor's gate opened, and Jiang Hai's car quickly drove in. Before the car arrived at the parking lot in front of the villa, there were already several figures waiting for Jiang Hai's arrival in the parking lot. Looking from afar, these several tall and short figures were the closest people to him here. Robbins and Ai Hua, who represented the cowboys and fishermen, smiled at Jiang Hai, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Standing next to them were Delina and Marian. These 2 little girls who came to Jiang Hai's place in the winter had recovered after a few months of good living. Their weight had risen sharply, and their figures had become better. Perhaps it was because they really pitied these 2 girls, and the 2 girls did not have any bad records. So in the manor, a group of women led by Mrs. Philemon were very concerned about these 2 girls. Sometimes, when they went to town to buy vegetables, they would specially bring back some clothes and snacks for the 2 girls. Jiang Hai was not a sissy, so there were very few snacks in his house. At most, there were some dried prunes and dried apricots. However, most children did not like to eat these things. Now, most of the clothes of the 2 girls were bought by Mrs. Philemon. Although Jiang Hai knew about this, he did not refuse their kindness. First, it was because the things were not very expensive. Second, it was because, after all, Delina and Marian were girls, and it was not easy for Jiang Hai to buy some personal clothes. He was still single, and with Mrs. Philemon's help, this was the best result. At this time, the 2 girls were standing in the parking lot. They were wearing a light yellow woolen top and a short skirt that reached their knees. Of course, they were not crazy enough to wear stockings or nothing at all. They also wore very thick leggings. However, because they were too thin, their legs were still abnormally thin. She was also wearing a pair of black flats. Jiang Hai didn't know what Mrs. Philip and the others were thinking. Originally, Jiang Hai couldn't tell the difference between the 2 sisters. Now that they were dressed like this, it was even harder to tell them apart. In addition to these 4 people, Jiang Hai's 4 pets were also gathered here at this time. Xiaobai and Little Yellow were carrying Bucktooth and Chirpy on their backs. However, Bucktooth did not dare to play on Little Yellow's back. He only dared to play on Xiaobai's back. But Xueqi didn't know much about this. After these days of growth, this little white-headed sea eagle's body had gradually grown a lot, and the feathers on its body had also gradually become plump. It was no longer like that gray thing at the beginning. Its pair of eyes were slightly more handsome, but it still could not fly. It only knew how to flap its wings at home. Especially during the days when Zhonghai was not around, it did not stop causing trouble. Now that it saw Zhonghai coming back, its eyes were full of surprise. When they saw Zhonghai coming down with the 2 big bags, the 4 little ones immediately rushed over. This was the longest time they had been away from Zhonghai since they were taken as pets by Zhonghai. When they left, these guys were still a little heartless, but now that Zhonghai was back, they went crazy. Even Little Yellow, who was usually cold, deliberately ran to Zhonghai's legs at this time and kept rubbing its head against the corner of Zhonghai's trousers. Okay. I know you all miss me. Be good, be quiet, be quiet. With so many things in his hands, Zhonghai couldn't spare them. He could only comfort these crazy little guys with words. Fortunately, when Daliana and Marian saw Zhonghai's look, they ran over with smiles and took the bags in Zhonghai's hands. It's so cold, why did you come out wearing so little? Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? After letting the 2 girls take the things in their hands, Zhonghai freed his hands and touched the 2 girls' hair, pretending to be dignified as he said to the 2 girls. However, his dignified manner was nothing to the 2 girls. They all smiled. Daliana directly carried the bags into the house, while Marian gestured to Zhonghai with one hand, telling Zhonghai that their clothes were actually very thick. Moreover, they had just come out of the villa, so they would not catch a cold in such a short time. Looking at her cute appearance, Zhonghai messed up her hair again, then comforted the little guys. After being intimate with these little guys, Zhonghai brought them into the house. Of course, Luo Binci and Ai Dehua also came in. In addition to welcoming Zhonghai, they also had to report the situation of these days face to face. As for the driver, Philip, after parking the car, he also followed them into the house. After entering the house, the enthusiasm of these little guys finally subsided a little, and the 2 girls took them to the 2nd floor to play. As for Zhonghai, he deliberately took out the tea leaves he bought from his backpack, made some Westlake Longjing tea, brewed a pot of tea, and put it on the table. Of course, everyone had a share. Boss, what is this? Looking at the undulating leaves in the cup and smelling the strong bean fragrance, Philip asked with some doubts. This is the tea leaves of Huaxia, the first of the top 10 green tea, Westlake Longjing tea, you can try it. If you don't like it, I will go and make coffee for you. Hearing Philip's words, Zhonghai motioned them to try it first. Tea leaves, I haven't drunk it for a long time. This thing is not so easy to buy in the United States, and the ones in those Huaxia stores are not ordinary expensive. Hearing Zhonghai's words, the others did not move, but Luo Binci picked up the cup with interest. Although it was only the worst glass cup, he was still very happy. He drank tea leaves a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, when he worked in Texas. At first, he didn't like this kind of light taste very much, but after drinking it for a few days, he found that this kind of light taste was really good and comfortable. If he didn't drink it for a long time, he would miss it because the food in the United States is too sour and too oily. It's good to drink green tea occasionally to clear the stomach, but after he left the ranch, it was difficult to drink tea again. The mainstream drink in the United States is still coffee. If you buy it at home, you can buy it with ground coffee or coffee beans, which are much cheaper than tea leaves. After all, the United States does not grow coffee, so in some tea-producing areas in the South, tea leaves are sold for 100 yuan per caddy. When they are shipped to the United States, they dare to sell it for 200 yuan per caddy. This is not a small burden for a cowboy with an average income. If you drink a caddy of tea leaves every day, you can drink it for about half a year, but if you buy coffee with 200 yuan per caddy, you can drink it for 3 years. This is a 6 times difference, plus the tea leaves that cost 100 yuan per caddy. How can this be considered good tea leaves? In China, good tea leaves that cost thousands of yuan or even tens of thousands of yuan per caddy are absolutely priceless in the United States. Originally, Robbins really didn't know that Zhonghai likes to drink tea because he has never seen him drink it. But now, it seems that he can come to Zhonghai's place to drink tea in the future. He immediately picked up the tea in front of him and gently blew the tea leaves that were still floating on the water surface. He took a small sip, and the fragrance instantly filled his mouth. There are many good and bad tea leaves. First of all, the most important thing is that the tea leaves can't have a bitter taste in the mouth. Zhang Hai spent so much money, so naturally, it is impossible for him to buy a bad tea. After taking a sip of tea, Robin's face showed a trace of a smile. As for Ai Hua and Philip, after seeing Robin's expression, they also took a small sip in a suspicious spirit. But then they frowned. They weren't scalded, but they were used to the taste of coffee. Chapter 189. I know this. What about the fishery? Hearing Luo Binxi's words, Zhang Hai nodded. In fact, he also knew that the grapes were almost ripe and it was time to plant them. If it was in the northeast of Huaxia, they would start planting around March every year. After half a year, the grapes would be harvested in September. But this is Boston, which is much warmer than the northeast of Huaxia. The coldest time in winter is about -10 degrees Celsius at night, which is far worse than the northeast. So now they can plant grapes here. If they want to make red wine or ice wine, they can discuss it later, but the winemaker is not so easy to find. Unlike cowboys and fishermen, as long as there are acquaintances in the bar, they can definitely find a winemaker. A winemaker is a person with real craftsmanship. There is almost no gap for these people. Moreover, their income was quite high. They were indeed a high-income group in this country. At least, they wouldn't have much to do with cowboys and fishermen. If Zhang Hai wanted to find these people, he might have to find them through the union. This matter couldn't be rushed. Let's take it slowly. There are no problems in the fishery recently. The growth of the watergrass is pretty good. The bait and the like have basically been scattered. Now we just need to go around the fishery every day and sprinkle some food for these animals to prevent them from migrating. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Edward Anderson hurriedly said, "No one is more concerned about the things underwater than him. When do we sprinkle the fry?" Looking at Edward Anderson, Zhang Hai also asked him. This mainly depends on the weather. As long as it is March, it is not too cold, and there are no continuous windy days, we can sprinkle the fry. I called Iron Bull the day before yesterday. He has already prepared the fry. These days, he is sterilizing and storing them separately. After all, it is such a big business. If it fails, his loss will be even greater. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Ai Dehua also said seriously. Hearing what Ai Dehua said, Zhang Hai also nodded. Zhang Hai is very relieved to leave the fishery to Ai Dehua. The reason why he asked this question now was mainly because he wanted to know what was going on. He couldn't possibly know nothing about his own fishery. If that was the case, his subordinates might not care too much about it. By the way, I heard that the fishery was attacked. What happened? After asking about the exact details of the ranch and the fishery, Zhang Hai turned his attention to the attack on the fishery. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Ai Dehua and Luo Binxi, who were still laughing, became serious. After looking at each other, Ai Dehua spoke to Zhang Hai. It's not difficult to explain. The people in Boston already know about our fishery, but normal fishermen basically won't come and take risks. After all, we also have 5 good men, plus Luo Binxi and the other cowboys. After all, there was blood. This matter could not be resolved peacefully. In the end, Ai Dehua called the police. After the police came, they arrested these people. After all, stealing fish is not a big deal. The next day, they were bailed out. After that, there were always some strangers patrolling Zhang Hai's manor. However, the fishery was quiet. At first, Luo Binxi and Ai Dehua did not pay much attention to it. It was not until a few days ago that these people actually climbed in and went to the front of the residential area. Fortunately, Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai were vigilant and felt that something was wrong. The 2 big dogs attacked and woke everyone up. At the same time, they also tore off a piece of flesh from a person's arm. However, this incident also reminded Luo Binxi and Ai Dehua. It seems that the patrols at night should be strengthened in the future. Otherwise, who can guarantee that this kind of thing will not happen in the future? These guys are really getting bolder and bolder. Zhang Hai waved to Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai, who had done a meritorious deed. After calling them over, he rubbed their heads hard and narrowed his eyes at the same time. Although Luo Binci and Ai Dehua did not say it explicitly, Zhang Hai was not stupid. If these guys really sneaked into his manor, no matter what their purpose was, Zhang Hai could not help but worry. If they attacked the cows for revenge, then Zhang Hai's loss would be great. If they directly attacked the people, Zhang Hai could not help but tilt his head. The consequences would be unimaginable. I looked at the outer fence next to our gate. There is only barbed wire. How about we build a wall, then pull the barbed wire on top and connect it with electricity? I don't believe that they would dare to come in. After thinking for a while, Zhang Hai first proposed an idea. But when they heard Zhang Hai's words, Philip, Luo Binci, and Ai Dehua's faces flashed with an unnatural smile. This kind of practice is very common in China, but it is not very common in the United States because the people in the United States advocate freedom and human rights. They are not willing to be locked in a narrow space, especially with walls that are isolated from the outside world. In most of the light punishment prisons in the United States, they use barbed wire to lock up prisoners, unlike the high walls in China. It can be seen how much the people in the United States hate being locked up. Zhang Hai looked at the appearance of these three people and knew what they were thinking in their hearts, so he just smiled and did not mention it. Since they are not willing to build a wall, then think of a way to strengthen the patrols. They can do this. At the same time, in addition to strengthening the patrols, they can also raise more dogs, but this time it is not to herd cattle, but to guard the house, so they must choose some fierce dogs, just like Zhang Hai's little Huang and Xiao Bai. I'll see you later. Chapter 190. Bang! With a loud noise, countless water splashed in all directions. Zhang Hai's mouth was wide open in surprise as he plunged into the sea. When he first entered the water, Zhang Hai was still very scared and panicked, but when he felt that he could breathe, he remembered that he was not afraid of water. It must be because he hasn't done this for a long time, so he was also a little confused. Feeling that Zhang Hai was beside him, Big Dumb over there, while eating beef, swam around Zhang Hai happily. "What the hell are you doing? You made me wet." Looking at Big Dumb beside him, Zhang Hai patted him and said with a look of disgust. Indeed, Zhang Hai himself was not afraid of water. His physical fitness allowed him to not be afraid of the cold, but his clothes were not. His whole body was wet, and he still had to ride the motorcycle back. Thinking about it, well, it was hard to believe. Feeling Zhang Hai's mood, Big Dumb, who was still spinning fast, stopped spinning. Many sharks, like tuna, rely on swimming to breathe, but sand tiger shark is different. This kind of shark is more lying on the sand or in the cave during the day, and only comes out to hunt at night, so it can stop. After this guy stopped, Zhang Hai also started to observe this big idiot that he raised. Unknowingly, this Big Dumb has grown bigger and bigger. Sand tiger shark was originally very ugly. Now it's getting uglier and uglier, with a mouth full of big fangs, and a body that is far more than ordinary sand tiger shark, all of which indicate that this guy can be regarded as the overlord of the sea recently. The average sand tiger shark is only 3 to 3.5 meters long, but this sand tiger shark, after being improved by Zhang Hai's blood, plus here, it doesn't have to worry about not having enough to eat. Its body length has grown to more than 4 meters, and it seems to be still growing. If it continues to grow, Zhang Hai doesn't know if it will surpass the giant white shark in the sea, but it should not be a problem to surpass the tiger shark. At this time, the sunlight on the sea level is very strong, and the coastal seabed is also clearly visible. Looking along the sunlight, Zhang Hai saw countless small seaweeds on the seabed at this time, swaying with the water. The temperature of the sea is actually much higher than the temperature in the air, especially in winter. Look at Ice City, it's more than -20 degrees Celsius, and people still swim in winter. If it's more than -20 degrees Celsius, running on the shore with only underwear, no matter how fast you run, you will freeze to death. Therefore, after these seaweed seeds entered the seabed, they gradually grew by relying on the sediment on the seabed. Looking at it from afar, it looked like a grassland on the seabed. Although this grassland still looked a bit sloppy, it was still very ordinary. But this is a good sign anyway. There is a large area of corals, but almost none of them have really grown into trees. Most of them are 10 or 20 centimeters high. Most of the corals growing on some reefs are white, gray, black, blue, and some are yellow, pink, and red. This is the only valuable coral species, but there are not many of them. Zhang Hai glanced at them and found only a dozen, and they are all relatively small, only about 10 centimeters high. They are not worth picking. Compared to corals, Zhang Hai does not know much about them. He only knows that these corals are not to be picked casually. The color of the corals was different. Not only was the price different, but there were also differences in the corals themselves. For example, black and gray corals had very low hardness. Zhang Hai didn't know how to mine them. Compared to corals, Zhang Hai was the one who understood the most about the marine products that came from the coral reefs. As soon as he swam over, Zhang Hai saw a few sea snakes in the distance, but these sea snakes dare not come to trouble Zhang Hai. They are not afraid of Zhang Hai, but the sand tiger shark behind Zhang Hai. In recent days, Big Fool has become the overlord here. This area is his territory, and no fish or creature dares to make trouble in front of him. Zhang Hai swam with Big Fool. Although it is a bit like a fox taking advantage of Big Fool's power, it is true that all evil creatures will retreat. Even Zhang Hai saw a huge eel. After seeing the Big Fool, it took the initiative to shrink back into its hole. This bodyguard was not hired in vain. With bursts of waves, Zhang Hai swam to the top of these coral reefs. He looked down and saw a lot of sea cucumbers on the sand and reefs on the ground. These sea cucumbers are almost 20 centimeters long, and there are small ones of all kinds. In addition to these sea cucumbers, there are many shellfish on the reefs, and even fist-sized abalones. Abalones were very valuable in China, but they weren't that valuable overseas. For example, in Australia, there were a lot of abalones in many parks and lakes. They were about the same size as these abalones, but they weren't allowed to be caught. Of course, the locals are not very interested in these things, but Zhang Hai is quite interested in these things. Beside the abalones, there are also a lot of big lobsters on the open space of the coral reefs. These Boston lobsters are even twice as big as the ones he ate in China. Maybe they felt Zhang Hai's attention. These lobsters also stopped, raised their big pincers, and aimed at Zhang Hai and Big Fool. In addition to lobsters, abalones, and sea cucumbers, there are also countless shrimp and all kinds of fish on the seabed. Countless clownfish are drilling in and out of the sea anemones growing on the reefs. They are having fun, but Zhang Hai does not dare to provoke these guys. Chapter 191. He returned to his small boat. Fortunately, the boat that Zhang Hai originally bought was not a small boat. Otherwise, the boat would have drifted to God knows where without an anchor after more than an hour. Fortunately, after anchoring the boat, Zhang Hai took a net from the boat and entered the sea again. He first went to catch lobsters. Compared to abalones and sea cucumbers, lobsters were obviously more suitable for Zhang Hai's feeding. Generally speaking, a Boston lobster that weighed about a pound could be caught because this size was enough to sell in the market. However, Zhang Hai obviously didn't think so, so he didn't catch lobsters that were shorter than 60 centimeters. In the end, he caught 2 lobsters that were about 70 centimeters long. The net he brought was already full. Although he didn't go ashore to weigh them, Zhang Hai felt that these 2 lobsters weighed 7 to 8 catties each. In China, they definitely wouldn't be worth less than tens of thousands. However, in Zhang Hai's sea, they weren't the biggest. Zhang Hai even saw one that was nearly a meter long, but this lobster was obviously very lively. Ordinary lobsters were very stupid. After seeing danger, their first thought was not to run, but to hold up their pincers and fight head-on with others. There were no words in their dictionary to run or hide, so these guys were very easy to catch. However, this guy that had turned into a demon obviously couldn't be counted as one of them. However, Zhang Hai was already very happy to have caught these 2 lobsters. There was no need to kill them all. After catching these 2 lobsters, Zhang Hai began to grab the sea cucumbers. Sea cucumbers were not very rare in the country. Of course, the price was a little expensive, but for the average working-class family, if they were ruthless enough to buy it, it would not be very expensive. It could only be said to be a high-end ingredient. However, in the United States this thing was really worthless. People in the United States didn't eat sea cucumbers. Only specialized pharmaceutical companies would collect the internal organs of sea cucumbers to make medicine. Therefore, some fishermen would collect some internal organs of sea cucumbers when they were fishing. As for the sea cucumbers themselves, they would throw them back into the sea. No one ate this thing. In the few months that Zhang Hai had been in the United States, Zhang Hai had already gotten used to the squandering habits of the Americans. After knowing that Zhang Hai would eat sea cucumbers, Ai Dehua and the others would not only send the Arctic lobsters and crabs they caught to Zhang Hai every time they returned from sea, but they would also send sea cucumbers. Therefore, Zhang Hai wasn't too greedy for sea cucumbers. If he wanted to eat them, he could just grab some at any time. Therefore, he didn't catch too many, only 20 or so. It was enough for him to eat 2 meals. In the end, he discovered that the base of the reef wasn't a reef, but a huge box. This box was about 1 cubic meter in size. What Zhang Hai pulled off was the top right corner of the box. He didn't know how long this box had been here, but he was sure of one thing. The things in this box were definitely not modern toys. It was very likely that they were antiques. Originally, a box of gold was enough to make Zhang Hai excited. Now that this box of gold was an antique, Zhang Hai's eyes were a little fiery. His first thought was to bring this box home, but after looking around, he found that there was no way to do so. In the end, he could only return to the ship and put the lobsters and sea cucumbers in the bag into the water trough. Then, he dived into the water again. This time, he didn't care about the box because the outside of the box was covered with reefs. He definitely couldn't move it. Instead of moving it with the worthless box, it was better to get the gold coins out first. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai didn't care about anything else. He directly knocked on the reef over there. Soon, he knocked a big hole. After confirming that there was nothing dangerous here, Zhang Hai began to take out the gold coins. One by one, he put the gold coins into the net he carried with him. Zhang Hai's eyes became brighter and brighter as he watched. While he was putting the coins in, Zhang Hai was also counting. There were a total of 427 gold coins in this box. Looking at these gold coins, Zhang Hai's hands trembled. He really made a fortune this time. He had been worried that he wouldn't have enough money. He didn't expect that someone would give him a pillow as soon as he fell asleep. The gold coins were about 15 grams each. Because Zhang Hai didn't know how long they had been refined, he estimated that these gold coins were at least 80 to 100 years old. After such a long time, it would be good if these gold coins could be refined to 10 grams after such a long time. There were 427 pills, which added up to about 4,000 grams. Based on the calculation of 200 per gram, that was only 800,000 yuan. This was in RMB, which was only a little more than $100,000 in US dollars. Although Zhang Hai didn't have much money, and he was quite short of money at the moment, he didn't lack $100,000 for such a big family business. What he cared more about was the historical significance behind these gold coins. Even if these gold coins only had 100 years of history, when the time comes, these 400 gold coins would not be exchanged for just a few 100,000. They would most likely become hundreds of thousands, millions, or even millions. This made Zhang Hai extremely tempted. Carrying these gold coins, Zhang Hai quickly returned to the boat. Without caring that his clothes were still wet, he took out a water tank and put the lobster, sea cucumber, and abalone on the top. As for the bottom, he put a layer of gold coins. Guard this place well. I'll come to see you when I have time. Patting the sand tiger shark's head, Zhang Hai started the boat's engine and sped toward the dock on the shore. By the time he came back, it was already past 6 o'clock in the evening. The earth was gradually covered in darkness. Only Luo Binsi was still here because he was still a little worried about Zhang Hai going out to sea. When he saw Zhang Hai come back wet, he was also very surprised. When he learned that it was Big Fool who pulled Zhang Hai into the water, he couldn't help but laugh. He knew that Big Fool liked to pull people into the water. Zhang Hai's fishermen all had this experience, but this shark was really smart. It could recognize people in the fishery, so at first, everyone was very panicked when they were pulled into the sea, but then they slowly calmed down. It was just that Zhang Hai didn't know that. The two of them rode 2 modified 4-wheeled motorcycles and sped all the way back to Zhang Hai's villa. When Zhang Hai returned, he found that the food and other things were basically prepared. The house was full of fragrance, which made Zhang Hai's fingers itch. The cowboys and fishermen were divided into 2 groups and gathered in Zhang Hai's living room to talk. As for Daliana and Marian, they were also happily chatting with the other 8 sisters. Since these girls came to Zhang Hai's manor, a lot of changes had happened. At least, they had enough to eat, wear warm clothes, and have some money to spend. There was an obvious change in their spirits. These days, they had gained a lot of weight. However, they didn't look fat because they were originally too thin. After gaining so much weight, they didn't even weigh more than 100 pounds. However, the more beautiful they were, the more they attracted the attention of the women. Chapter 192. When Jiang Hai pushed open the door of the villa, his figure also attracted everyone's attention. "Boss!" The cowboys and fishermen immediately greeted him with smiles, but the ones who walked the fastest were the 8 girls. But when the 8 girls saw Jiang Hai's wet appearance, they were all stunned. Then they didn't care about the fishy smell on Jiang Hai's body and greeted him with smiles, each of them giving Jiang Hai a hug. Seeing these girls' actions, the women who were originally very wary of these girls calmed down a little. It seemed that these girls didn't have much interest in their old man. In fact, from their point of view, they didn't care what story Jiang Hai had with these girls. If Jiang Hai had the leisure to accept these girls, then they would definitely be the happiest. Hee, hello, I also bought you a gift. I'll give it to you after we finish eating. Although Jiang Hai already knew that a hug in the United States wasn't too much, he wasn't from the United States after all, so his face was a little awkward. But he was still holding the box in his hand at this time, so he couldn't let go because the box was full of gold coins. The door was only so big, so he couldn't dodge or let go, so he could only accept it with a red face and then said awkwardly, "Welcome back." Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, the leader of the girls, Aphrodite Arnold, used sign language to signal to Jiang Hai. Seeing Aphrodite's watery eyes and obedient appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shudder. He immediately drove out the things that he couldn't write in his mind and shouted to Luo Binsi, who was watching the show in the distance. "Luo Binsi, come and help." "Okay." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Luo Binsi also immediately walked over with a smile. Ai de Hua too. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai also said to Ai de Hua, who followed him in. Luo Binsi might not understand why Jiang Hai wanted him to help, but Ai de Hua knew very well because he just opened the box in Jiang Hai's hand and saw that there were only 2 lobsters, some sea cucumbers, and an abalone. What was there to clean up? But since the boss spoke, Ai de Hua didn't refute, but nodded, and the 3 of them walked into the cold storage next to them. "Boss, isn't it just 2 lobsters? You usually clean up by yourself. Why didn't you know how to clean up after returning to Huaxia?" Walking into the cold storage, Jiang Hai opened the lid of the box. As soon as he saw the things inside the box, Luo Binsi smiled. He felt that Jiang Hai was making a big deal out of nothing. Eating lobsters is actually very simple. It's very simple in the United States. There are nothing more than 3 ways to cook it. Roast it, steam it, and bake it. Roast and bake it are very simple. Brush the dirty things on the shell, then fry the feet below, and cut a line from the back to clean up the dirty things. Steaming it is a bit troublesome. You need to brush the things on the shell clean first, then put it in water with sesame oil overnight. When it spits out the dirty things, it can be steamed. So the people in the United States don't eat steamed lobsters too much. For them, cleaning up lobsters is really not troublesome. As for sea cucumbers, they don't eat them. Abalone. There is only one. What's so good about it? Not this thing, it's this. Seeing the puzzled eyes of the 2 people, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at them, then took off the top lid, revealing a pile of glittering gold coins below. "Oh my God, what is this, gold?" Seeing the gold coins below, Luo Binsi, who was still laughing, instantly knelt on the ground. Looking at the gold in front of him, he felt a little dazed. Boss, where did you get this?" On the other hand, although Ai de Hua was slightly better off than him, he was also trembling all over. Although there wasn't much gold, the impact was indeed much greater than money and whatnot. Pointing to the gold coins in the box, Ai de Hua swallowed and asked in a low voice. "Shu, you 2 are the people I trust the most. That's why I asked you to give me some advice. I don't understand what's written on it. Is it valuable?" Jiang Hai made a gesture to the 2 of them to keep their voices down. He picked one up and said. The gold coin that Jiang Hai picked up is divided into 2 sides. On one side, there is a face of a person. It should be a fat man with not much hair. There is also an olive branch on his head. On the fat man's head, it is written George versus I de Gria. Jiang Hai can't understand what it means. The back seems to be a badge, but because it has been soaking in the water for too long, he is also a little unclear. He had seen it once when he was on the boat, and he didn't know what the hell it was, so he came back to ask these 2 people. It's not that Jiang Hai doesn't trust others, but the fewer people who know about this, the better. In this manner, Jiang Hai trusts his pets the most. In addition to the pets, There are only Luo Binsi and Ai Dehua. Otherwise, it would be impossible to hand over the cowboys and fishermen to them. Even Delina and Marian don't make Zhang Hai feel at ease. I don't know. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Luo Binsi on the other side first picked up a piece and looked at it, then shook his head helplessly. Hearing his words, Ai Dehua on the other side also picked it up. He was not very sure. He could only vaguely say, "This? I don't know, but it seems to be a British gold coin. What year is it?" Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Zhang Hai also touched his chin and thought for a while. "I don't know this. I have to find a professional to identify it." Shrugging, Ai Dehua threw the gold coin back into the box. "That, boss, we will go out first. This box of gold, although it is not much and it is not worth much if it is sold as gold, but if it is an antique, then it is worth a lot. You have to take care of it." Chapter 193. Puff. There was another splash of water, and Zhang Hai's figure fell back into the water. As Zhang Hai entered the water, a huge shadow appeared beside Zhang Hai and kept wandering around. Patting the head of the sand tiger shark beside him, Zhang Hai chuckled and swam toward the coral reef in the distance. This was the second day since Zhang Hai came back, and also the second day after he found the gold coins. Last night, after he learned the value of the gold coins, he didn't have a good rest. In his mind, he was thinking about the news about these gold coins. Why these gold coins are here, how they got here, who put them here, or what kind of accident happened. Zhang Hai didn't care at all. According to Moses Adams's friend, the gold coins were likely to be related to the war between Britain and the United States. The so-called war between Britain and the United States was also called the Second Independence War. It had a special meaning for the United States, but for Zhang Hai, it didn't mean anything. After all, Zhang Hai wasn't from this country. For him, he only knew that the gold coins were worth $400, and that was enough. When he was lying in bed yesterday, he vaguely remembered that there seemed to be a lot of reefs like that. There were more than 400 gold coins in this box, which was nearly $200,000. If there were 10 boxes, it would be $2 million. If there were 100 boxes, it would be $20 million. Recently, he had almost no money in his bank account. Including this year's tax, Zhang Hai's assets were estimated to be only $1.8 million. Originally, he also knew that there was a lot of wealth in the sea, but he had been conflicted because the sea was terrifying for him. But now, it seemed that it didn't matter if it was in front of his house. The most important thing was that Zhang Hai really should find a way to make some money. Although he could wait until the beef show in April, there were still 2 months. During these 2 months, Zhang Hai couldn't just sit around and eat. So this morning, after breakfast, he left the villa. This time, he was much better prepared than he was yesterday. Not only did he change into a warm diving suit, but he also specially brought a new bag, a small shovel, and a knife to deal with the problems in the sea. After driving the boat to the furthest position of the coral reef, Zhang Hai fixed the boat there. When the boat arrived, Big Dumb had already appeared. After discovering that it was Zhang Hai, it was obviously very excited. After Zhang Hai threw a large piece of beef to it, he changed his clothes and turned over to enter the water. Zhang Hai didn't need to worry about breathing in the water, plus he was wearing a diving suit, so the resistance was much lower than yesterday. After meeting with Big Dumb, Zhang Hai took a pile of things and quickly swam to the reefs in the distance. It turned out that the energy contained in beef was indeed much more than that of fish. Sharks consumed a lot of physical strength in the water. Therefore, fish like them, or tunas, need to constantly swim to obtain food. But now, after eating beef, Big Fool obviously had more energy than usual, which made him feel even more hungry. In this way, Zhang Hai unknowingly dug for more than 3 hours. During this time, there were times when he dug, and times when he didn't dig. The ratio was about 3 to 1. Of the 3 that he couldn't dig, there was 1 that he could dig. But even with this ratio, Zhang Hai had dug almost a dozen chests. Looking down, the bag that he originally used to store the gold coins was almost full at this time. It seemed that he had to transport them back. And looking up, Zhang Hai had only dug about 1/30th of this reef of similar size. Zhang Hai's reef group was really not small. Go back to eat first, I'll come back later. Although Zhang Hai's physical fitness could be said to be the limit of human beings, With such high intensity working underwater for so long, he also couldn't bear it. Looking at Big Fool, who was already hungry and circling above his head, Jiang Hai also smiled and swam back to the boat. Of course, when he left, he caught a few crabs, a lobster, and some abalones. He didn't eat them yesterday, so he had to try them tonight. The abalones that Jiang Hai dug were the largest, about half a gene each. These were the best two-headed abalones. Jiang Hai didn't have much opportunity to eat them before. Today was really his lucky day. After getting on the boat, Jiang Hai asked Big Fool to look for food while he changed his clothes. Just like yesterday, he put the gold coins below and the seafood he caught on top. Then, he drove the boat back to the dock. At the dock, Edward Anderson was instructing everyone to check the situation of the boat. They had already patrolled once in the morning, and were going to do it again in the afternoon. Although everyone was a little curious about their boss, Jiang Hai, and wondered what Jiang Hai was doing alone at sea for half a day, Ai Dehua knew that this mysterious Mr. Dongfang was not someone they could inquire about. After suppressing the fisherman's curiosity and helping Jiang Hai fix the chests, Jiang Hai returned home. When he got home, Mrs. Philemon had already prepared lunch. Jiang Hai had a simple meal and said goodbye to Daliana and Marian. Then, he carried 10 gene of beef and left again. In the afternoon, he went to the same area again. After giving the beef to Big Fool, who had followed the sound, he dived into the bottom of the sea again. When he went back at noon, he roughly counted the gold coins that he had gotten in the morning. There were a total of 6,217 gold coins. If one gold coin could be sold for $400, that would be nearly $5 million. Whatever he did, he could earn more than $2 million in a single morning. Chapter 194. Clang 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 clang. Bursts of deafening music kept ringing in a slum street in the southern part of Boston. Because of its age, the walls could not completely isolate the music, but they did not stop the music from spreading out. But the people living here did not come out to say that they were disturbing the residents, or that they were too noisy. First, they did not dare to. Second, they were used to it. Even at this time, there were many people living nearby. If they walked forward at this time, they would find that there were some problems with the sign of this bar, because the neon lights outside the bar at this time did not show anything like home or song. It was a normal bar name. There was only one word flashing on it: Negro. If Jiang Hai were here at this time, he would be very surprised, because this word was specifically told by the mayor of Winthrop Town that he should never mention it in front of black people, because this word also meant black slaves. But at this time, these people dared to brazenly hang this word as a signboard here. It was obvious that the people inside were definitely not good people. And that was the truth. If the scene was pushed forward and they walked into this bar, they would find that this place was really hell. Walking into this bar, they would find that there were some high platforms around the bar. At this time, there was a woman standing on each high platform, swaying violently with the music, making some seductive gestures from time to time. When the mood of the audience was raised to the highest point, they would directly take off their clothes and dance on the high platform naked. If some men below took a fancy to them, or if they took a fancy to them, they might directly sit on the high platform and jump into their arms. The smell of hormones was not only concentrated in the corridors and bathrooms, but even in the hall. Some people even did that on the spot. Kissing and kissing were no longer their pursuit. Now they preferred to go straight to the point. Accompanied by the madness of these people, in some corners that people could not see, some punks with tattoos on their bodies were also there, peddling some things that the government did not allow to be sold, such as Red Bull. Alright, although the effects were about the same, the nature was much worse. When Jiang Hai was in New York, the place that Moses Adams took him to was simply a gentleman's cocktail party compared to this place. This was the place where people released their most primitive desires. But the people here had one thing in common. They were all white. Not to mention blacks, Asians, and even Hispanics were completely absent here. All of them were pure Caucasians with blonde hair and blue eyes. Looking down from the top, it was really a sea of white. According to an average of about 430 gold coins per box, these 21 boxes would have at least 9,000 gold coins. 9,000 gold coins, plus the 6,000 gold coins he caught in the morning, he would have a daily income of 15,000 gold coins. If one gold coin was 400, that would be more than 6 million. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai was also a little excited. But at this time, his attention was attracted by the small notebook in his right hand. This small notebook was the thing in the small iron box. He had to admit that the small iron box's sealing performance was really good. After more than 100 years, except for the paper of the notebook that couldn't be more yellow, there was not much water in the iron box, so this small notebook could be preserved. After soaking in the sea for such a long time, although the notebook was not rotten and could be flipped through normally, it was inevitable that the handwriting on it would be a little messy, but it did not hinder reading. But what made Jiang Hai the most depressed was that the notebook was indeed in English. When he opened it up, he knew each word, but when they were put together into a sentence, he had a feeling of being unable to make sense of it. After reading it, he roughly figured out that this should be a diary. The person who wrote this diary was called John Wiltord. His identity seemed to be a major, and he was an Englishman. However, he was a little confused about what was written in it. Just when Jiang Hai was about to go back and ask about the internet, he returned to his villa. When he opened the door of the villa, he saw 3 figures sitting at the table and chairs in the living room not far away. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the 3 people also looked over. Among the 3 people, Delina and Marion were naturally present. In addition to them, there was also Xueqi Clive. Jiang Hai was familiar with such a scene. Because since Delina and Marion came to Jiang Hai's home, he wanted the 2 girls to go to school. Xueqi Clive was naturally the first choice, but Xueqi Clive was later persuaded by Jiang Hai. After all, the 2 girls' situation was somewhat special. It was indeed a little excessive for them to go to primary school when they were supposed to be in junior high school. Most importantly, the 2 girls' problems made them easy to bully in school. It was precisely because of this that Xueqi Clive decided to let the 2 children study at home. When she was free, she would come over to give them a small class and tutor them. Jiang Hai wanted to give her money, but she didn't accept it. However, every time she left, Jiang Hai would bring her some beef. Although Xueqi Clive knew that the price of beef outside was sky high, it was really nothing for Jiang Hai, so she didn't refuse. Seeing that she often brought this kind of expensive beef home, her family members all encouraged her to pursue Jiang Hai. At least for her French chef father, Jiang Hai was the best son-in-law in the world. Seeing Jiang Hai come back, Xueqi Clive stood up and said with a smile, "You're back." "Oh hee, I'll go change my clothes first." Now that he saw Xueqi Clive, Jiang Hai's face suddenly turned red. He didn't think about it before, but just a few days ago, he was still fantasizing about his potential marriage partner on his bed at home. In the end, Xueqi Clive won with an absolute majority of votes. Who asked Jiang Hai to only know her. Now that he saw her again, Jiang Hai really felt a little embarrassed. "Okay, then let's continue." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xueqi Clive didn't think too much about it, but sat down and continued to talk. As for Jiang Hai, he went upstairs. After putting away the gold coins, Jiang Hai also took a bath and changed his clothes. When he was about to go downstairs, he saw the diary that he threw aside. He couldn't understand it, but perhaps Xueqi Clive could. After all, no matter what, she was a purebred American, and also a teacher, so there should be no problem with her knowledge. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai also took down the small book. When he went downstairs, Daliana and Marion had also finished the questions and were packing up. "Just in time, Teacher Xanthi, you haven't had dinner yet, right? Let's eat here." Seeing that Xanthi Clive was also packing up, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile and said to her, "It's okay, I'll eat when I go back." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xueqi Clive shook her head. In the United States there was no such thing as eating together. Generally speaking, eating together had to be arranged in advance. "Hey, you also know the habits of us Asians. You can eat here. In fact, they are all semi-finished products. I'll roast some lobsters, get some abalones, and fry a steak. By the way, if you have nothing to do, help me look at this." Jiang Hai heard Xueqi Clive's words. How could he let you go so easily? The little book hasn't been translated yet. She had never dreamt of such a life before. She was truly blessed to be living here. Looking at her younger sister's expression, Daliana also smiled. It was also her wish that her younger sister could live so happily. At this moment, Jiang Hai and Xueqi Clive who were in the car didn't know what the 2 girls were thinking about. At this moment, the two were talking about a dish that Xueqi Clive had just learned to cook, braised veal with white sauce. It was also a kind of stew and one of the most classic dishes in French cuisine. It was the same as braised beef with red wine. However, red wine was also added here, but not much, so the soup was white. Although Zhang Hai wasn't very talented in cooking, he was willing to give it a try sometimes. If he used the beef brisket or tendon in his manner to cook this dish, the taste would be quite good. As they talked and listened, they sped off in Winthrop's direction. However, the two men didn't notice that when Zhang Hai's car left the manor, a motorcycle in the distance also started its engine and slowly followed. At the same time, he also called Boston. As his phone rang, many motorcycles, plus a few cars, also left the southern part of Boston with a whistling sound. They were speeding towards Winthrop. Judging from their leather jackets, steel pipes, and baseball bats, it wasn't hard to tell that they didn't come with good intentions. Just as these people were speeding towards Winthrop, Zhang Hai had already sent Xueqi Clive back to her home. He had just parked the car downstairs of Xueqi Clive's house. On the second floor, a face that looked like Xueqi Clive stretched out. "Hey, it's so late. Are you going to send my sister back? Are you stupid?" The owner of the pretty face looked at Zhang Hai and Xueqi Clive, who had gotten out of the car downstairs, and said loudly to Zhang Hai. Hearing this person's words, Zhang Hai's face flashed with embarrassment. "What's going on? Hey, comma. Is your butt itchy again? Don't mind it. This child is usually crazy like this. You have seen her once before, in the sea temple." With a shrug, Xueqi Clive first yelled at Karma Cliff, then said apologetically to Zhang Hai. After her reminder, Zhang Hai remembered. It seemed to be true. Then he waved at Karma Cliff. As for Karma Cliff, she obviously didn't appreciate Zhang Hai's goodwill. Instead, she stuck out her tongue at Zhang Hai, then went back. Seeing his sister, Xueqi Clive didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Then that's it for now. I have class tomorrow, so the day after tomorrow, I'll teach Delina and Marion. You should go back quickly. It's getting late." Turning his head, Xueqi Clive looked at Zhang Hai behind him and said with a smile. Hearing Xueqi Clive's words, Zhang Hai also nodded. After watching Xueqi Clive go into the house, Zhang Hai also returned to his car, started the engine, and went to his manor. "Sister, you haven't taken this guy down yet." "You hit my car. How are we going to settle this?" Looking at the man lying on the ground, Zhang Hai grumpily said while rubbing his temples. "Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, hey." At this moment, the man who was motionless in front of Zhang Hai suddenly rolled forward. A switchblade had been pulled out of his sleeve and stabbed toward Zhang Hai's thigh. Fortunately, Zhang Hai's car lights were always on. When the man's switchblade flashed, Zhang Hai's eyes had already caught a glimpse of the reflection. He subconsciously stepped back. This step allowed his body to leave the blade of the switchblade, but his pants were cut open. A lot of duck feathers flew out in an instant. F***CK, he's serious. Seeing that his pants were broken, Zhang Hai's eyes couldn't help but widen. Looking at the switchblade coming at him again, Zhang Hai cursed loudly. He didn't retreat but moved forward. He had learned this trick from Bale before. His legs clamped in the air and instantly went under the man's arm holding the switchblade. He clamped the man's arm and head, and at the same time, he grabbed the man's hand with both hands and used a cross hold in an instant. Ha! With Zhang Hai's shout, the switchblade in the man's hand was twisted to the side by Zhang Hai in an instant. The switchblade had to be released and fell on the road in the distance. The man was still hammering Zhang Hai's leg that was holding his head. "Speak, who asked you to come here? You animal! How dare you sneak attack me?" However, this man's slap was nothing to Zhang Hai. He still forcefully twisted this guy's hand and shouted at him. Come on, come on. But this guy was also a tough guy. His hand was almost twisted into a fried dough twist, but he still didn't say a word. F***CK. Seeing that this tough guy was ready to die, Zhang Hai cursed secretly. Since he was willing to die, then he was willing to bury him. Just as Zhang Hai was about to break his hand, suddenly there was the sound of an engine from a distance. Then, in Zhang Hai's line of sight, a dozen motorcycles and 2 cars rushed over from his side of the road. F***CK. There are reinforcements. Seeing these people rushing over, Zhang Hai was also shocked. Although he was very good at fighting, there were at least 30 or 40 people in these motorcycles and 2 cars. And from the lights in the distance, these people seemed to have guns in their hands. Zhang Hai didn't know if they had guns, but looking at it, if he fought with 30 or 40 people with guns, it seemed that he couldn't beat them. Knowing that he couldn't beat them, he still fought here. If there was a mission, then he was a hero. If there was no mission, then he was a fool. Although Zhang Hai wasn't smart, he wasn't stupid, so he let go of this guy's hand at the first moment, turned around and ran. However, before he ran away, he deliberately gave this guy a kick. It could be seen that this guy was in cahoots with these people. Quickly climbing into the car, Zhang Hai wanted to start the engine and run toward Winthrop. If it really didn't work, then he could just rush over. Although his F-650 wasn't an armored car, it wasn't a problem for it to send a motorcycle flying. But the problem now was that this F-650 was too good. It had an automatic braking function. If the car was hit, it would be very difficult to start again. This was because he was afraid that after the car was hit by the airbag, the owner would become delirious and cause a second injury. This was originally a good idea, but in Zhang Hai's mind, it became the worst design. Zhang Hai had no choice but to lock the car door and then take his phone to call the police. Surround him. We don't have much time. Pull him out. Looking at Zhang Hai, who was sitting in the driver's seat, a voice came from the radio of these motorcycles. Hearing this voice, the people on the motorcycles also rushed over. When they passed by Zhang Hai's car, the baseball bats, water pipes, and steel bars immediately smashed this monster. Bang 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 bang. With a series of bangs, the car's headlights and mirrors were all smashed away. There were also many holes in the car's door, but they were mainly focused on the glass. Although it was shattered into countless pieces, it did not explode. They still isolated Zhang Hai from these people. At this time, Zhang Hai had to admit that when he bought this F-650, he had a lot of foresight. If it was an ordinary car, it would probably have been destroyed. But at the same time, Zhang Hai also felt that this car's protective ability didn't seem to be very good. After he sold the gold coins, he would see if he could change to another car. Now he wanted to change, but he had no money. Zhang Hai still had the mind to think at this time. His mentality was really good. Bang 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 bang. Seeing that they couldn't break the glass, the people here became even more presumptuous. They swung their weapons and smashed Zhang Hai's car. Zhang Hai was sitting in the car. Since these people couldn't destroy his car, Zhang Hai also looked at these people. Although he didn't know who these people were, they dared to provoke him, so this matter wasn't over. Bastard! Looking at Zhang Hai's F-650 that can't be broken in a short time, a man sitting in the back seat of the car said with a gloomy face. At this time, his mobile phone also rang. Looking at the message on it, he couldn't help but curl his lips. He picked up the walkie-talkie and issued a new order to his subordinates. Let's go! Retreat! As soon as the low male voice fell, the group of hoodlums who were still surrounding Zhang Hai and smashing his car also got into their own cars and sped away. Even the person who was originally lying there was rescued by them at the first moment. Just as Zhang Hai was puzzled by these people coming and going like the wind, a siren rang. The Winthrop County Police Department only had a total of 8 police cars. Zhang Hai, a big taxpayer, called the police, so 6 police cars came instantly and drove over from afar. 4 of them went to chase after those people, and 2 stopped next to Zhang Hai's F-650. Mr. Zhang, I'm Winthrop's police chief, Murray Smith. Mr. Zhang, are you okay? As the door of the police car opened, an old policeman came down from the front passenger seat and came to the side of Zhang Hai's car. Zhang Hai remembered this old man. He was the Winthrop's police chief. When Zhang Hai wanted to sue the Winthrop Police Department, it was this police chief who came to his house to beg for mercy. In the end, he agreed to let them go. He didn't expect his kindness to be repaid. Generally speaking, arriving within 5 minutes after calling the police was considered very timely. However, after Zhang Hai called the police, these people had already arrived 2 minutes later. If these people also arrived within 5 minutes as mentioned above, then Zhang Hai really didn't know if his glass could hold up. Thinking of how those people attacked, Zhang Hai couldn't help but shiver. This was troublesome. Chapter 197. Boss, are you okay? A burst of messy footsteps came from outside the Winthrop police station. Then Robbins and others rushed in anxiously and asked Jiang Hai, who was still sitting at the desk over there and talking to Murray Smith, for fear that something happened to their boss. It's okay, the car was smashed. It will probably take a lot of time to repair it. Hearing Robbins' words, Jiang Hai smiled and nodded. Looking at Robbins and others in front of him, he was relieved. Then I'll go back first. When you have time, Director Smith, remember to come to my place as a guest. This time, I owe you a favor. When the time comes, we'll go together. There will be enough premium grade A beef, but the taste may be a little worse, haha. Motioning to Robbins and others to wait for a while, Jiang Hai turned his head and said to Murray Smith with a smile. Sure, we will contact the police in Boston as soon as possible to see if there are any clues. But the effect is estimated to not be too great. Standing up and shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Murray Smith said helplessly. Do your best. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said seriously, then followed Robbins and others out of the police station. Sitting straight in the back seat of an F-750, Jiang Hai's whole body withered. Boss, are you all right? Who are those people who attacked you? Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Robbins Garcia, who got in the car at this time, also hurriedly asked. As the person who has followed Jiang Hai for the longest time, no one likes his current job more than him. The income is quite good, the boss is good, and it's what he likes to do. The most beautiful thing in the world is happening around him. If anyone wants to take back this beautiful life, he will really fight with those people. There's no news. According to the news from Boston, many of the cameras at the intersection have been destroyed in the past 2 days. These people should be a group of habitual criminals. They're very sophisticated. I don't think there's any news. However, this time, it's not like we didn't gain anything. Recently, Director Smith has decided to increase the number of police cars patrolling near our manor from 1 to 3, 24 hours a day. This can be considered as protecting our manor. By the way, all of you have come out and guarded the manor properly? There won't be any problems in the manor. Bell has already taken his baby to the roof. Edward, Philip, Tommy Charles, and Harriman Fells stayed there. I also released your little Huang and Xiao Bai. If they dare to come again, they won't be able to go back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robin said to Jiang Hai bitterly while driving. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was also relieved. With such a strong defense force, unless the other party sends a tank, it's impossible to break in. But if the other party really has a tank, then Jiang Hai would have run away long ago. It was still enough, but now the situation of the manor. How could I forget him? AI, since I'm already here, I can't just go back directly. Come on. Originally, Jiang Hai hoped that his friends could come over to play with him and stay with him here for a few days. But this did not mean that he had to risk their safety, especially when the manor was not very peaceful these days. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai estimated that these people did not succeed tonight, so they probably would not make a move in the next few days. Thinking of this, he was also relieved. After returning to the villa, Jiang Hai also let the others rest. Daliana and Marian were not woken up. Robinsi still had a sense of propriety when he did things. After all, Jiang Hai was fine. If everyone knew about it, he didn't know what would happen to others. If Daliana and Marian wanted to go with them to find Jiang Hai, it would be troublesome if something happened on the way. At least, it was safe in the manor. After glancing at the two sisters, Jiang Hai returned to his room and lay down on his bed. Not long after, he fell into a deep sleep. He was not a person who particularly liked to use his brain. Today, the amount of brain use had obviously exceeded his expectations. Plus, he was hit by the airbag, which was quite unbearable. It seems that I have to get a better car in the future. With this thought in mind, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. After sleeping for 6 hours, although Jiang Hai was reluctant to get up, he forced himself to get out of bed. After preparing breakfast for the two sisters and cleaning up, he went to find Maren Rupert and Edouard Anderson. The three of them could be regarded as drivers on the road. At the same time, because the airport in the manor was almost repaired, even if the heavy plane could not take off, at least the helicopter would not be a problem. Jiang Hai did not want his sailors to encounter any danger at sea, so it was necessary to get the helicopter back in advance. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, the two also got up early. After a simple wash, the three of them drove a Ford F-750 to the New York airport in the distance. After all, it was not their first time driving, so the car was always fast on the road. In less than 3 hours, Zhang Hai and the others had arrived at the parking lot outside JFK Airport. Less than 10 minutes after they parked the car, Zhang Hai's phone had already rung. As soon as he picked up, Fu Yuan's representative voice sounded from the phone. "Hey, I'm here, where are you?" "I'm in the parking lot. Come out. I'll pick you up at the door." Zhang Hai rubbed his ears, which were a little muffled, and said to Ai Dehua and Marin, then got out of the car. In a few steps, Zhang Hai had already arrived at the exit. When he stood here for a while, he saw Fu Yuan walking out while licking his lips and looking around. At that time, you will be the real culprit of the destruction of mankind. Casually waving his hand, Zhang Hai looked at Fu Yuan and said lightly, "Whether his kidneys were good or not, what did it have to do with him? F***CK, your hat is getting better and better." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also laughed. The conversation between the two people was all joking and couldn't be taken seriously, but Ai Dehua, who was sitting in the back row, was a little depressed. Because these two people were talking in Chinese, he couldn't understand. After talking for a long time, he had nothing to do except to be in a daze at the back. But fortunately, this section of the road was not particularly difficult to drive. Not long after, everyone arrived in Boston. After another half an hour, everyone returned to Zhang Hai's manor. When Zhang Hai's car stopped in front of the villa, the two big dogs had already appeared beside the car, looking at the people in the car with longing. When Fu Yuan saw the two dogs, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Fu Yuan is also a dog lover. He used to raise dogs, but he raised them for more than 10 years. In the end, the dog died, and he was very sad. Since then, he hadn't raised them, but now that he saw Zhang Hai's dogs, he was still very interested. But when he got down from the passenger seat, besides being interested, he was also a little afraid. The F-750 was very tall, especially on the passenger side. When he looked at the two dogs in the car, although they were big, they weren't particularly big. They were about the same size as the ones he used to raise. But when he got down, he realized that something was wrong. The two dogs were lying on the ground, and their heads were about to reach his chest. The Caucasian Mastiff and Green Wolf Mastiff were originally large dogs. Coupled with the stimulation of Zhang Hai's blood, they had undergone a second growth spurt. After these days of improvement and good food and drink, the size of these two dogs had changed once again. Now, the Green Wolf Mastiff was more than 1.9 meters tall when it stood up, and the Caucasus had grown to more than 2 meters. When it stood up, it was already taller than Zhang Hai by a head, not to mention Fu Yuan, who was only 1.7 meters tall. When the two dogs came over, their heads were about to reach his chest. When he saw these two huge beasts, he couldn't help but take a step back subconsciously. He looked at these two fellows with some hesitation. One was black, and the other was green. They looked really scary. "Okay, this is my friend. He'll be staying here for a few days. Don't bully him. Okay, go back." Fortunately, at this time, Zhang Hai also jumped down from the back seat, patted the two dogs' heads, and casually instructed them. When they heard Zhang Hai's words, the two big dogs curiously went forward and sniffed Fu Yuan, then left eagerly. Looking at the backs of the two dogs leaving, Fu Yuan couldn't help but lick his lips. "Hey, I say, this dog of yours, any one of them will do. Remember to leave one for me when you give birth." Pointing at Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai, Fu Yuan's eyes lit up. He really cared about these two dogs. I don't have the intention to pair them up yet. But even if I do, how are you going to take them back?" Scratching his head, Zhang Hai asked curiously. When he heard Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan glanced at him. "I'd rather spend money on quarantine. These dogs are really beautiful." It could be seen that Fu Yuan was really a dog lover. Such a dog was really worth a lot in China. Of course, if a person really liked dogs, they would not associate dogs with money. Compared to Fu Yuan, Zhang Hai was much more rational. He wasn't a dog fan. He also ate dog meat, and he wouldn't refuse something as delicious as dog meat. He raised dogs to relieve boredom and to guard the house. If he were to raise them as pets, he wouldn't pick these two dogs that weren't cute at all. Compared to these two guys, Die, Teeth and Chirp, Chirp was still a baby, so they were more like pets. No matter how he looked at it, these two guys didn't match well with pets. After bidding farewell to Edward Anderson, Jiang Hai took Fu Yuan back to his villa. While walking, he also talked about their itinerary for the next few days. They would rest for the day and have a steak dinner in the evening. There was also a lobster and a few abalones in the freezer, which was enough for him to enjoy. Then they would go horseback riding tomorrow, fishing on a boat the day after that, and playing with guns the day after that. In any case, in Jiang Hai's manner, he was a relatively idle person. Playing with his friends wasn't a big deal. Chapter 200. Yujia. As soon as he heard Fu Yuan say the word goddess, Jiang Hai's first impression was the giant beast sitting quietly over there when they attended the class reunion. Speaking of which, Fu Yuan's heavy taste was also recognized by everyone. Well, she asked me what I was doing, where I was, and so on. It seems that the goddess still cares about me. Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan's eyes began to drift. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the United States now, he might have already drifted to find his goddess. Oh, then do you want dinner or the goddess? Looking at Fu Yuan's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Dinner. Without any hesitation, Fu Yuan recovered his consciousness in an instant and said to Jiang Hai with a serious face, "Why didn't you say goddess this time?" Seeing that Fu Yuan had made a choice, Jiang Hai walked downstairs. It's said that when one is full, one will think about that. I'm still hungry. How can I have the leisure and energy to do that? By the way, what are we eating tonight? With a casual smile, Fu Yuan followed Jiang Hai downstairs. You can eat whatever you want. With Fu Yuan, Jiang Hai walked to the front of his cold storage and said with a mysterious face, "Bull**T, I want to eat abalone." Looking at Jiang Hai with contempt, Fu Yuan said with a cold face, "Yes, the best two-headed abalone." Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai opened the door and pointed to a pool next to him. Following Fu Yuan's gaze, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Sure enough, he saw a pile of fist-sized abalones crawling around in the pool. There were also many sea cucumbers in the pool. They were living sea cucumbers that were slowly wriggling under the water. Gulp, I also want to eat lobster. Looking at the things in the pool, Fu Yuan said with a serious face. Yes, will such a big one do? Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai had already walked into the cold storage. He grabbed a huge lobster in front of a table. Looking at this lobster that was at least 3 times bigger than the one that Jiang Hai had seen at the class reunion, Fu Yuan didn't know what to say. He immediately took out his mobile phone and began to take photos. Wow, this lobster, wow, these pincers, wow, this length, damn, it's a shrimp king. While taking photos, Fu Yuan's mouth didn't stop moving. What kind of shrimp king is this? There are many bigger ones in the sea. The ones we ate yesterday were bigger than this. Jiang Hai casually threw the lobster into his pocket. He was going to clean it up later. F***ck, you guys eat this stuff every day. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fu Yuan was confused. Not every day. I can't get tired of eating it every day. When I want to eat it, I will go to the sea to catch a few. It's just a matter of a few minutes. Originally, when Jiang Hai said the first half of the sentence, he was relieved. If he ate these things every day, it would be too wasteful. But later, Jiang Hai told him that he was thinking too much. He didn't eat it every day because he would get tired of it. Looking at Jiang Hai's face that was corrupted by capitalism, Fu Yuan said bitterly. Then he quickly ordered, F***ck, corrupt, shameless, evil capitalist society. People like you should hang a sign to criticize you. I want to eat this lobster, and this abalone, and this sea cucumber. Okay, these were originally prepared for you. In fact, the main dish is still beef. After listening to Fu Yuan's words, Jiang Hai chuckled and walked to the compartment in the cold storage. As he opened it, dozens of processed beef were hanging in this space. The meat these years were all special grade A frost snow beef, but they were all frozen. Zhang Hai's manor now had a total of more than 20 people, nearly 30 people. Even if half of them were women, women still needed to eat. As a member of the manor, eating beef was inevitable. On average, each person consumed 2 pounds of beef every day. That was more than 50 pounds a day. An Angus bull weighed about 700 kilograms after this winter's fattening. The highest weight had reached 750 kilograms, which was about 1,500 pounds. The slaughter rate was 65%, which meant that nearly 1,000 pounds of meat could be produced. If all of this beef was eaten, one bull could feed the entire manor for 20 days. But because Zhang Hai's bulls were really good, the production rate of special grade A beef was extremely high. The people in the manor weren't willing to eat this meat. They were already very happy to be able to get some special and preferred meat. And these beef were all sent to Zhang Hai. But the problem was that Zhang Hai's bulls had a very high probability of producing special grade A beef. Almost every bull had it, and every bull would produce more than 10% of special grade A beef, which was more than 100 pounds. Sometimes it could even reach 200 pounds. But the problem was that Zhang Hai couldn't eat so much, and the other people in the manor didn't dare to eat it because it was too expensive. So, Zhang Hai's special grade A beef was getting more and more. Almost every half a month, he would have more than 100 pounds of beef that had been cleaned up. Zhang Hai couldn't say much to Luo Binci and the others, so he could only put it here first. Although frozen beef was not as delicious as ice, special grade A beef was special grade A. Even if it was raw, it was still delicious. Gulp! Looking at Zhang Hai's pile of beef, Fu Yuan couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Before he had eaten this kind of beef, he had only heard of it at most, but he had never seen it before. He didn't care much about this kind of beef. But after eating it, he knew the difference between this kind of beef and ordinary beef. The beef that Zhang Hai sent back to the country was divided into 10 pounds for each of them, and they had basically eaten it all these days, especially Fu Yuan's family. After the 5th day of the Chinese New Year, his parents came back and brought a group of relatives back, and they ate all the beef in one meal. When they were eating, although Fu Yuan was distressed, he couldn't say anything. After the meal, he told his father that this beef was more than 2,000 yuan per pound. His father almost ate the table when he heard it, although their family was not short of money. But more than 2,000 yuan per pound of beef. Thinking about it, his father and his grandmother also felt distressed. Is this eating beef? This is eating gold bars. But at this time, the gold bars in their eyes were hanging everywhere in Zhang Hai's cold storage. When we go back this time, you have to give me some more of this beef. Looking at the beef in front of him, Fu Yuan's hands trembled. No problem, I'll take as much as I can. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai also smiled. These are supreme delicacies in the eyes of others, but in Zhang Hai's eyes, it was just some beef, although it was the best beef. Hey! Why do you have a chicken here? Forcing himself to look away from the beef, he suddenly saw that in the cold storage, there was a chicken that had been cleaned up, but to call it a chicken, this chicken was too small. What kind of eyes are you looking at? This is not a chicken. This is a wyvern. Picking up the frozen thing on the ground, Zhang Hai said with some pity. Before Christmas, he and his men went to the forest. The turkey that was caught there was finished before Christmas, but Zhang Hai didn't eat the wyverns that they caught. Instead, he built a nest and raised them in the vegetable garden. Only the wyvern that was killed by little Huang, after cutting off its head, Zhang Hai froze the rest of its body. It's not that he didn't want to eat it, but he didn't know how to cook it. It was like shark's fin. Everyone knew that this was delicious, but who knew how to cook it? Wyvern? I haven't seen this in years. The meat of yours is so tight. Is it wild? Looking at Zhang Hai, the look of surprise on Fu Yuan's face became even more intense. Just like beef, Fu Yuan had actually eaten wyverns before. This was because when he was young, his father was a soldier. He was a local soldier in the northeast, and he was considered a soldier's relative. The place where he was a soldier was in a mountainous area. There were wyverns in the mountains, but when he was young, there weren't many wyverns left, but the soldiers still caught some to eat. When soldiers cooked in the wild, there were only 2 ways to eat, roast or stew. The ingredients were things that could be caught. Most of them were snakes and rabbits. Although they were wild, It wouldn't be delicious if you tried to cook them. Dragon meat in the sky, donkey meat on the ground. Many people had heard of this saying, but not many knew that the dragon meat referred to the wyvern. By the time the commoners had the opportunity to know what dragon meat was, it was already the modern era. Ever since the founding of the dynasty, the flying dragon soup was an indispensable dish in the state banquets. It was also because of this that the flying dragons were taken seriously by the people again. However, it was also because of this that there weren't many flying dragons in the country. This was because there were too many people who wanted to eat them. Because Zhang Hai's ingredients were very complete, Fu Yuan made the flying dragon ginseng pine mushroom soup today. The two of them first went to the place where the flying dragons were kept behind the house and caught 5 more flying dragons. This one died a long time ago and was used to make soup by Fu Yuan. It was already in the pot. Tonight, they were eating these 5 live flying dragons. They cut their throats, let their blood out, and scalded their feathers. In fact, killing a flying dragon was not much different from killing a chicken. After cleaning up, the soup for the flying dragon was almost ready. Then, Fu Yuan started to get busy. After about half an hour, the soup was finally ready. They even used a clay pot to stew it. Zhang Hai used his hand to fan the fragrance floating out of the pot. He clicked his tongue. This smell was really hard to describe. Although it was fragrant, it was not as fragrant as one would imagine. But if it was not fragrant, it was indeed very fragrant. Moreover, it was an indescribable fragrance. It was somewhat like the smell of chicken, but not quite. It was really difficult to distinguish. Next, it's up to you. After closing the lid, Fu Yuan sat in the kitchen and watched Zhang Hai prepare other things. Okay, just watch. After hearing what Fu Yuan said, Zhang Hai didn't stand on ceremony and began to clean up. The things he wanted to make were very simple. It was also something he often made. Baked lobster with cheese, steamed abalone, scallion braised sea cucumber, and 2 types of beef. One was made into steak, and the other was braised beef with red wine. Compared to the flying dragon soup, the taste of these things was more fragrant. He watched Zhang Hai busy there. Over here, Fu Yuan was also holding his phone and taking pictures left and right. Those raw materials were his main focus. He also put these pictures in his group chat. Once he put them in, they were much more shocking than the pictures he took in the house. In an instant, his group chat exploded. Especially when they saw the fist-sized abalone and the huge lobster, his group chat was about to go crazy. F***CK. Such a long lobster. Did you hit the lottery? This is unreasonable. That abalone. 1 is enough for me to eat for a meal. You actually want to make 10 of them. Do you have any shame? After they left New York just now, in order to test the performance of the helicopter, they deliberately went to the sea area around Zhang Hai's manor before returning here. On the way, the two also found a place for Marin Rupert to drive for a while. If there were any problems, he had already felt it in advance. Now is the time to communicate. How about the plane? Can I use it? Patting the giant ladder beside him, Zhang Hai asked with some envy. He also wants to fly it, but the problem is that he doesn't know how to fly it. It seems that learning how to fly a helicopter is something he has to learn in the future. There are no problems with the hardware of the helicopter, just some adjustments. We can finish it in a while, and then we can use it to navigate tomorrow. When he heard Zhang Hai's words, Marin Rupert naturally knew his purpose in coming here, so he immediately said. Although he was mainly here as a driver, there were a lot of people who knew how to drive a boat. He was mainly invited by Zhang Hai because he has a pilot license. Now is the time for him to show his ability. Okay, then can we go to sea in this thing tomorrow? Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Zhang Hai also asked excitedly. As soon as he said that, Fu Yuan, who was behind him, looked at Marlon Rupert, Delina, and Marion eagerly. It was obvious that they were also very interested in this plane. Of course, we will fly around tomorrow morning, and then when we fly again in the afternoon, the boss will take the 2 ladies and this gentleman with him. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Marin Rupert also smiled. The boss's wish must be fulfilled. He was such an awkward person. Hey, I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously. If I'm here, what will my father do? What will my mother do? Don't look at my job. It's because of my father's relationship that I got in. If I say I quit, he will skin me alive. Although he was a little drunk, Fu Yuan did not lose his mind. He could not help but say to Zhang Hai helplessly. After saying that, he took a big gulp of beer and laughed self-deprecatingly. Besides, I can't do anything here. It's not like you don't know how bad my English is. All right, I'm not joking. Let's continue drinking. Picking up the beer cup in front of him, Fu Yuan and Zhang Hai drank another cup. Both of them drank half a cup in one gulp and then continued to chat. That night, they talked a lot. When Fu Yuan was so drunk that he almost crawled under the table, it was already past 1 o'clock in the morning. Zhang Hai looked at him. Although he was a little drunk, it was not heavy. He drank the last cup of beer. Zhang Hai grabbed Fu Yuan and went back to his room. As a man, he did not care about whether he was comfortable or not. If he wanted to take off a man's clothes, shoes or face, he might as well kill him. Throwing him on the bed, Zhang Hai went back to his room to sleep. Time passed by, and the manor's night came quietly. When Zhang Hai woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning the next day, on the other side of the ocean in Huaxia, the sky had just turned completely dark. At this time, the nightlife had just begun. Holding up the phone, Qili's assistant, a girl wearing glasses, said anxiously, Boss, look, Fu Yuan just updated his WeChat moments. It's all about food. There's also a picture of your husband. Do you want to take a look? At this time, Qili had just finished approving the work that needed to be done today. She was leaning on her chair in a daze. When she heard Qili's words, she reacted for a moment. Then, she took Qili's phone and looked at it. The first thing that caught her eye was a huge lobster. It was a picture of what it looked like before and after it was cooked. In addition, there were big abalones, big sea cucumbers, the legendary dragon soup, steak, and so on. Of course, among the food, there were selfies of Fu Yuan and Zhang Hai. They really know how to enjoy themselves. Then, looking at Fu Yuan's WeChat moments, Qili snorted in disdain. Especially when she saw Zhang Hai's sweet smile in the picture, her handsome long eyebrows raised. Ever since the last unfriendly meeting with Zhang Hai, Qili realized that she would often think of Zhang Hai. If in the past, she would think of him once every 10 days or half a month, now she would think of him once every 2 or 3 days. Especially the image of Zhang Hai asking her to sign the divorce agreement. It was an image that she could not forget for a long time. This didn't mean that she had fallen in love with Zhang Hai, but this feeling made her very uncomfortable. It was like a doll that was originally hers. Although she didn't like it, it was still hers. But suddenly one day, this doll had its own soul and no longer belonged to her. She had to take the initiative to draw a clear line between them. This was something she couldn't accept. Especially the feeling of being dumped, it made her very angry. Qili had been very strong since she was young. The only time she had been in a relationship was when she dumped someone else. Now that she was dumped, she felt extremely unbalanced in her heart. This made her feel that she had been humiliated. Even if it was a divorce, she should be the one dumping Zhang Hai. Why should Zhang Hai dump her? Therefore, she started to understand Zhang Hai's past, his present, and even his sly friends. She asked for Fu Yuan and the others' WeChat numbers from Zhang Hai's former class monitor. Then, she asked her assistant to add her. Fu Yuan and the others naturally had no resistance to being added by a beautiful woman. They quickly added each other. Every day, this girl saw their WeChat moments clearly. Obviously, Zhang Hai did not know that his brothers had become traitors. Director Qi, I think so too. These guys really know how to enjoy life. I don't even have such a big lobster. Cough. President Qi doesn't eat it often. This girl with glasses had seen a lot with Qili, but this was the first time she had seen the things in the photo. I cough. All right, the woman I asked you to investigate recently. Have you found anything? Hearing this, Qili could not help but cough lightly. She subconsciously wanted to say that she had not eaten it either, but fortunately, she stopped in time. Found it. Her name is Feng Yunchen. She is a print model. We found that she seems to be Lu Zhangyang's mistress. Hearing Qili's words, The girl with glasses immediately took out Feng Yunchen's information from her pocket and handed it over. A mistress. Arrange it. I'll treat her to a meal. Qili glanced at the document, narrowed her eyes and said in a low voice. Treat her to a meal? Okay, where should we go? Hearing that Qili wanted to treat this woman to a meal, the girl with glasses was very confused. But as an assistant, she knew that she only needed to do things obediently, so she raised her head and asked. Seafood restaurant. Let's go eat lobster. After thinking for a while, she didn't know why the lobster in the photo just now appeared in Qili's mind. She casually picked up the coat on the boss chair and said as she walked out. Ever since she and Zhonghai had some inexplicable relationship on the 29th, these days, she and Zhonghai seemed to have returned to the status of ordinary friends. Besides sending a New Year's message to Zhonghai during the New Year, they had only sent 2 or 3 messages in total, and each time they spoke for a very short time. After about 5 or 6 messages, they went to do their own things. It was hard to say what the relationship between the two was, but after that night, it seemed that the originally estranged feelings were once again estranged. No one knew what was going on in Feng Yunchen's mind, but Zhonghai really didn't think about her. On the 7th day of the new year, Feng Yunchen returned to the imperial capital because she had recently received a new job. As an internet celebrity, there were 4 main places to work. The first was CJ, the second was the various major car shows, the third was to shoot posters, take photos and pictorials, and the fourth was to be a spokesperson. Of course, their endorsement fees weren't high, and they weren't like those big stars, endorsing makeup products, luxury goods, or even cars. Their endorsements were more for games, web-based games, and not those big productions. This kind of web-based game was very convenient to make, and it had been very popular in recent years. Hundreds of thousands of them were opened a year, and hundreds of thousands of them were closed. But these had nothing to do with Feng Yunchen. She only needed to come over and make a few coquettish poses, and then shout out an advertising slogan. What happened next had nothing to do with her. Tonight, she had just finished all the production of the game. Feng Yunchen left the set after rejecting the lecherous director's invitation to dinner. But just as she walked to the street, a Bentley stopped in front of her. Miss Feng, our chairman invites you to dinner. The back door opened and the bespectacled girl walked out of the back seat of the car with a smile. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.